like if I do this, that's
That
like
makes
terrible. That's like terrible for the network because on the network and how much.
Oh, now we're hearing an
Well, I
echo.
just messed up the network doing that.
I was going to say, it's like the doctor who said the old joke about you go to the doctor and say, doctor, it hurts when I do this. And the doctor says, well, then don't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning. It's a fabulous morning, Tuesday, and we're here with Dr. Temple Grandin, and we've already had technical difficulties. I am told that we are live right now on YouTube, but that we have not been able to go live on Facebook. So I'm asking everyone who's watching us on YouTube to go to your Facebook and tell people to come and watch us on YouTube, because we're here with Dr. Temple Grandin, and I don't know, the internet is broken. But we're still here, and Dr. Grandin is ready to answer your questions, and so you can be sending them into us on YouTube right now. We will get this reposted on Facebook later on today, but I don't know, Facebook is not my friend today, or the internet is not my friend. I'm not sure which one, but I'll tell you who I do count as a friend is Dr. Temple Grandin. She's one of my favorite people on this planet, and she is a celebrated author and a teacher and an advocate. And right before we went live, we were talking about how books, ebooks, and hardcover books, and how it might be a little bit difficult to get books, but we want you to know that it isn't
easy to get. Excuse me, I just did something that might make the network. Ebooks,
we were talking.
Ebooks aren't where the problem is. Ebooks work fine. Amazon's got plenty of ebooks. That's where.
But it's the hardcover that people might think is hard.
Paper, it's the physical books where there's a problem.
But
it's like the internet's gotten overloaded. All the warehouse distribution supply chains are also completely overloaded.
But there are a couple of places where they can go to get your hardcover books, and they won't have a big delay, and there won't be a big wait. For instance, they can go to Future Horizons,
right,
to their website, and they can order all of your books from right there.
Yeah,
so
all my physical books are available there, and then I have some textbooks, and one of my textbooks publishers is going to be setting up a website to distribute directly for physical books.
There you go. So don't despair. Don't despair. Don't do without books, but find different places to order them if they're being held up for you. So Temple, we're so thrilled to have you twice in the month of April. The last time we talked to you was April 2nd, World Autism Awareness Day. We just want to do it first because we got tons of questions that have already come in.
Okay.
But first, just want to check in with you. How are you doing in this period of isolation?
Well, I'm working right now on updating my Improving Animal Welfare, a Practical Approach book. I have a number of guest authors in that. It's a textbook, which makes it a little pricey since it is a textbook. And most of my guest authors are getting things done. Actually, I've had plenty of time to work on it. I might be doing an even better job of updating it. Been looking up on all kinds of articles to add to it right here. This is stuff I just looked up this morning. I print out.
I always love to know what you're researching, because the last time we had talked to you, you were researching protein symmetry, and it was some beautiful artwork. As you said, art in your body. What were you researching this morning, or is it secret?
It's not a secret. I was simply looking up problems with older dairy cows, and that sometimes they get into very bad condition. And I was trying to just get some updated data on that. Because
very cool.
The second edition came out in 2015, and for the new 20 or 21 edition, I want to try to have the newer references. It's not changing a great deal. It's just updating it. So I was just looking up new information on bruises and survey that my student did at cow-calf producers on management practices.
Very cool.
That.
I was telling you earlier that the first time I met you, the first time I interviewed you, we brought one of the people on our crew brought cows, plastic cows, and you signed this one for me. You actually signed a couple of them, and Autism Live gave some away to some really incredible people. I don't know if you know, that's how we ended up going to NASA together.
Yes.
You signed a cow for me, and I gave it to one of the flight directors at NASA, and he was like, "Is this what I think it is? Is this a cow signed by Temple Grandin?" And I said, "Yeah." And he was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you've met her." And I said, "She would love to come here. And why haven't you invited her?" And that's how that whole thing happened. We went to NASA together and toured. It was Temple, my small crew, and what was it, like 5 astronauts that were following you around all day?
That was like a super, super fun trip.
It was a great day. I have the video from it, and at some point we have to make a short film about that, about you going to NASA, because it's some pretty fabulous video. But okay, that's neither here nor there. Let's get into some questions, shall we? Because we have a lot of people voting. I just want to tell everybody, I have pages of questions that people wrote in. Can you see multiple pages, plus which we're taking questions right now on Facebook, on YouTube, on Periscope, and on Twitter. So if you are on one of those mediums and it seems that I am ignoring your question, please know that we're buried in questions, but keep them coming in. Okay, first question. I really want to know how Dr. Grandin started eating any kind of food. Did she work on sensory issues? Did she just decide to start trying different foods? My son is 11 years old, and since he was 2 years, became very selective. He says that he will eat once. He says he will eat once he went to secondary school, but he changes his mind and keep telling me that when he turns 20, he will eat then. He is a healthy boy, but really worries me that he doesn't want to eat like everybody else. So how did you, because you were selective for a while.
Well, actually, I was a good eater. The reason why I was eating the yogurt and Jell-O in the movie is when I got in my 20s, I had terrible problems with anxiety, terrible colitis attacks. And then when I went on antidepressant medication, real low doses of it, the colitis attacks actually stopped because my nervous system wasn't in such a state of stress. But there were times where the colitis attacks were so bad that everything went through me, and that's why I ate yogurt and Jell-O. And then I would gradually wean off of that. And actually hated yogurt. I had one doctor wanted me to drink buttermilk. That's like liquid vomit. I had to chug that stuff down. Ugh. And then I would wean back gradually onto regular food, some saltine crackers. And then I'll go and do a talk, and there in the green room's a whole bunch of little Jell-O things. I just hate Jell-O. It was something I had to do because of colitis. But let's just talk about kids that are picky eaters. One way to help to get them into it is trying new things, is let them get involved with food preparation, where they can play with the food out in the kitchen. We don't play with food at the dining room table. Want to have manners there, but in the kitchen we can play with food and explore it. Sometimes that's helpful. And one of my big concerns, if a kid just eats just 2 really restricted things, is the old vitamin deficiency diseases. I was just looking at one of my autism newsletters, and there was some kids that got scurvy. That's vitamin C deficiency, because of being on a very, very restricted diet, and they weren't taking any vitamins. Get food preparation. Just get them involved in that, and they get to play with it. And then they might want to taste it, and that's a simple thing to do.
Food is a very sensory experience. I love that idea. Another question. Good morning, Dr. Grandin. I have a 10-year-old son diagnosed at 5 years old, went from verbal to nonverbal. We started ABA therapy at 5 years, and he has a lot of words now dominated by a strong mouth stimulation, echoing, scripting almost 95% of the day. Because of his scripting behavior, the school hold him at ASD 1. He knows his alphabet, his numbers, some sight words. He can read short phrases, well potty trained since 2 years, very independent. I'm trying all I know. Please help me. Any strategies that can help us decrease the echoing?
Well, there's 3 ways basically the brain can be messed up on speech. When I was a little kid, the grown-ups talked fast. I thought grown-ups had a foreign language. That's why that was grown-up talk. And I have some auditory processing. And one thing my speech teacher did with me, she'd hold up a cup, or maybe she'd hold up a pen, and she'd say pen, and then she'd say pen, where she'd enunciate it, and she'd switch back and forth. And then I had problems with getting speech out. I personally was never echolalic, where I might recite a movie script out, but there been some success with echolalic kids. If you can take the movie script that they don't know what it means, they yak out a movie script. Why a movie script? Because when they watch that on the television, it's always said the same way. Like if I said dog, that's a Harvard accent. Dog, that's some other accent. See, it sounds like a different word, but that TV always says it exactly the same way. So that's why they'll script a commercial or a movie that they can play over and over again. But sometimes you can work some of the words from that movie into the real world. They'll start to learn that language is real. Also, a lot of kids have a lot of sensory issues. And kids that don't get functional language often live in a sensory disordered world. Now, there's two books I'd really recommend that people read where they have a kid that does not get really good functional language. And one is Tito Mukapadahe, How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? It's available online as an ebook. Okay, ebook distribution is no problem. You can get ebooks, audiobooks. That's just fine. It's physical books where there's problems. But this book, Tito Mukapadahe, he has a lot of movements he can't control, looks really severe, but he's basically got a locked-in syndrome. There's a good brain in there, and he can type independently. I have seen him. And he talks about a sensory disordered world. His mom always took him out there, but you read that book, you're really going to get some insight into what maybe your child might be experiencing. I don't want to use the word might. Another really good book is the sequel to The Reason I Jump. I can never remember the exact title because it's something like fall down 5 times, get up 9 times, but it's the sequel. And he describes things like not being able to control his movements. He was sort of like a broken robot. And these books will give you insight. These people that type completely independently, the sequel to The Reason I Jump. And that's all of this, they're available in electronic. And then, of course, I always like to promote my own book, The Way I See It, which has just come out in a new edition, available electronically from Amazon, physical book from Future Horizons.
Wonderful. So the sequel is fall down 7 times, get up 8. I can remember the 78, but I want to know, how long did it take you before you could say Tito? I can't even pronounce his last name. How long did it take you to learn that, Temple?
Well, that took a little while. And don't ask me how to spell it.
Okay.
And the title of his book is How Can I Talk If My Lips Don't Move? But if you're working with, I'm not talking about 3-year-olds here. I don't recommend these books for people with 3-year-olds. But you got an older kid, doesn't have functional language. I think these books are must reads because they're going to give you tremendous insight into what's going on.
Wonderful. Somebody wants to know, my 13-year-old son seems to avoid speaking about autism-related conversations. At one point, I felt he was depressed. Suggestions?
Well, the thing is, things interesting on how you view autism. You go out to Silicon Valley, to big tech companies that bring you the technology we're using, and they avoid the label. They don't want to be labeled, with a disability. And then I see other kids where autism becomes their entire identity. I don't think that's good either. Maybe something more in the middle might be better. For me, autism is an important part of who I am, but being a scientist and a problem solver right now, I work on a lot of different things trying to solve problems. That's that comes first for me. I think I just talked to a really interesting person. I have to keep some confidentiality. This is a person who works for a major important technological stuff, had an IQ off the charts in everything, never got labeled with autism, but then she had a high IQ. She said, well, I could go places. Well, she was waiting on tables one day, and she waited on 2 people that opened up to the door into a fabulous technological career. I have to keep confidentiality, but yes. She recognized, and then when the guys talked to her, they recognized her intelligence and she was invited right in. That's back door. And the thing is, she recognized that back door, but her label was high IQ. It was the only label that she had. She's a person, 50s, a bit of an older person. But you see, I did the same thing in my career. There's a scene in the HBO movie where I go up and I get the editor's card because I realized if I wrote for that magazine, that would really help my career. And she recognized the door and she went through it and she was waiting on tables. Sometimes you just don't know who you're waiting on. See, half of all good jobs are gotten through the back door anyway. All good jobs.
I believe that too. Okay, somebody wants to know, glad to see you ladies. What are the signs that a kid will reach a high functioning level? My son is 6 years old. He is functionally verbal and has a moderate level of autism. He has been receiving ABA for 3 years now.
I can't answer specifically, but let's just look at 6 years old. Okay, I'll ask you about the speech. Can he ask questions? Can he request things? Can he read? I was 8 years old and I couldn't read. And mother taught me with phonics. And I went very quickly from the 3rd grade level up to the 6th grade level of reading. But let's just look at the skills. The thing is, a person with autism or a child with autism, they blossom. I've had parents say, well, I got my kid out doing all these things, got my kid out on a boat, never thought he'd get on a boat. And they get out and do things. You just don't know. But there's a tendency to overprotect. What you want to do is stretch and say, well, would you want to go on a boat or would you want to go for a hike? You know, give them a choice, but get them out there doing things and they can sometimes really blossom. They can do a lot more than what you think. And,
absolutely.
And I'm a visual thinker, so I don't really relate to terms like level 1 or moderate. I'm going to go, okay, let's just look at the skills. Dress, shower. Let's start with the basics. Potty. Okay, should be learning some reading skills, writing skills. Maybe he has motor issues. Well, then he can type. There's a reason why keyboards were invented. You know, what can he do? It's when kids are really little, you just can't tell. I looked horrible when I was a real little kid, just horrible.
I want to bring up, since you brought up your mother, that your mom, Eustacia Cutler, is going to be with us on Friday.
Good.
And she's going to be answering questions and she's going to speak a little bit about a bunch of things. And so she's asked that people send their questions in early and that she wants to answer questions on a general nature. We're working out a way that she can meet with people to answer questions individually. She prefers to do it that way. So we're asking for you to send your questions in for Eustacia. You can do that as soon as the show is over, because later on today, I'm going to go over some of the questions with her. But we're really excited to have your mom on Friday.
Well, good. That's just great. But I'm going to be, you know, like that. It's hard. First of all, I don't have enough information to answer things absolutely specifically. But there's a tendency, and I can understand why Silicon Valley avoids the labels, to become the label. Like this lady, I just talked to her. She had high IQ. She started talking to these tech guys. Next thing, they're taking her over to the workplace and they're hiring her.
Yeah. Yes. Because
I'm pretty sure she's on the autism spectrum.
There we go.
Sure. Just in talking to her, and I'm pretty sure she's autistic. I can't say for sure, but.
Right. I love Howie Mandel. He has a phrase. He says, you know, let's stop talking about what somebody can't do. Let's look at what they can do. He says, let's not talk about disability. Let's talk about this ability.
Well, this is what Stephen Hawking has to say. Y'all know who Stephen Hawking is.
Yes.
Concentrate on the things. Your disability does not prevent you from doing well.
There we go. I love it.
I really like that.
I like that too. I also like different but equal, and we know who started that.
Yeah.
That would be you.
Yeah.
Wonderful friend. Okay, next question. Someone told me that fine motor is also connected to oral motor. What are your thoughts about that? They say that their son is having trouble lifting his tongue.
Well, you need to go to a specialist on that. You know, occupational therapist, physical therapist, you definitely need to see a specialist. I am not qualified to.
Have you ever heard of the fine motor, though, being connected to the oral motor? I've never heard that before.
Well, I would definitely go to a specialist. Now, I have my other favorite thing I do, and that's reading scientific papers. Then I might end up going deep into the literature, but I recommend you get professional advice on them.
M says, this is interesting. I'm autistic and you talk about it well. Michelle wants to say hi to you.
Oh, thank you.
Devin says, I'm also autistic with Asperger's syndrome. When I was in hospital, my mother said that I have Asperger's to the nurses, and they did not know a bit about it, which is fascinating. Okay. Next question. My son is 4, and so it's so hard to get him to focus on anything besides his routine play. Any suggestions at all for a 4-year-old who always wants to play the same thing, Temple?
Well, when I was maybe 5 or so, or 6 years old, I would just draw the same horse head over again. And mother would suggest, well, let's draw the rest of the horse's body. Now, I need to, before I can actually give you any specific advice, I need to know what he does over and over again. Because what you want to try to do is take whatever he does. Let's say it's lining up blocks. Let's just say it's that. Well, then let's turn it into a turn-taking game where we're going to take turns lining up the block. I do a block, you do a block. Let's just start out with something very simple like that to try to broaden it into a turn-taking game. And when I was that age, there was a lot of emphasis on turn-taking games done with board games, a little bit older card games. You've got to learn to wait your turn. Okay, let's say he's spinning a wheel on a toy car. Well, then we're going to share the car and take turns with it. And then hand the car back and forth. We'll take turns spinning the wheel. Then I want to broaden it out into driving the car around. And we're going to go to different places in the living room, like the bookcase or the chair leg, just something like that. Just very simple things like that, broaden it.
Wonderful. This is a tough one. My 10-year-old nonverbal grandson started hitting himself very hard in his face, leaving bruises, hiding under a blanket, even when going out, and being very disconnected. Doctor said it's puberty. What's your thought? It's heartbreaking.
Well, you better get some professional advice on that. The other thing you've got to look at is exactly when did the behavior start? Okay, this is a basic principle in animal behavior. I don't care if it's dog behavior, horse behavior, you got some kind of a problem. People tend to overgeneralize. I want to know exactly when that started. Puberty comes on somewhat gradually. Maybe there was a traumatic event, something like that, a death in the family. I don't know. But I've got to figure out what the behavior might be related to something. Now, there's some kids that hit themselves, and I've read first-person accounts about this, and they don't even realize they're doing it in some cases. Sometimes occupational therapy, sensory stuff can help on this. But there's a big mistake in animal behavior and human behavior to overgeneralize. And people say, oh, my horse just goes berserk. Well, after questioning the person, I found out there was one specific place where a horse went berserk. And when he was tied up in the cross ties, because he'd had an accident in the cross ties. So then we stopped using cross ties. So I'm going to ask you, when does this behavior occur?
Yeah.
It isn't something, and you're going to you need to do something about this. This is serious.
I think, Temple, a lot of, in the early years when our kids are diagnosed, a lot of the stuff we hear is that people will say, well, autism, there's a lot of, they do a lot of random, strange behavior. But I know I've certainly learned over the years, there's nothing random.
Not random. It's not random.
There's a reason for everything.
Well, what I did, I can remember I was allowed to do an hour after lunch of spinning a brass plate that covered up a bolt on the bed frame. And when I did these repetitive things, it was calming. That's why the kid does it. But the problem is, if you let a kid do it all day, nothing's going to go into his head. It's okay to do a little bit of stimming to calm down. That's okay. But
there you go.
Doing it all day is not okay because you shut off the brain. I remember doing it. I remember winding up the swings, letting them twirl. It was almost like taking a drug. And so a little bit of just non-hurtful repetitive behavior like spinning something is fine. But then she'd get me out and we were expected to sit down and have meals together, do games where we take turns, have table manners. If I put my finger in my drink, mother would say, use the spoon to stir it, just manners stuff.
What was it that you loved about spinning the plate? What was it that made you feel better?
I loved watching it because when I spun something, I'd spin it with different amounts of force. And then I could watch, well, how long would it spin? How would it wobble as it stopped spinning? And tiny little details of how it behaved. Which
is really being scientific.
Yeah, I can remember dribbling sand through my hands, and I would just study each little grain, like looking at it under a microscope. And one thing I loved doing as a child was doing sand castles where you dribble sand through your hands. I really liked doing that. And it's okay to do some of that stuff. But the problem is if a kid does it all day,
Yeah.
they're not gonna learn anything else, like playing video games all the day. Yeah, you might get really good at playing video games, but you're not gonna learn anything else.
Do you still do anything like the spinning the plate or like the sand through your fingers? That's part of your daily.
I do a lot of doodling on papers. I'll do a lot of that kind of stuff. I've got like 25 binder clips in a chain that I'll sometimes manipulate when I'm on the phone.
Love it.
They're in my upstairs office.
So Temple, we have a very special guest who's going to be on the show on Thursday. He is a young man who is he's on the autism spectrum. He's an actor and he's a professional actor. He's 17 years old. He was first on Speechless. Then he played an autistic young boy on The Good Doctor. Good. And now he has a great role on the hit Netflix show Lock and Key. Okay. And he plays an autistic young man on that. He's going to be joining us on Thursday. His name is Kobe Bird. He's a big fan of yours.
Oh, great.
And,
thank you.
And so I was talking to him and his mom last night. They want to know, do you still utilize something like your cow squisher?
No, that broke about 10 years ago and I never got around to fixing it. So then I started hugging real people. Now we're not allowed to do that now with social distancing. So
was the real people giving you the same thing that the cow squisher was giving you?
Well, I didn't need as much from the cow squisher. Now, one thing that I still have got to do is I got to do a burst of intense exercise every day. And if I don't do it, even taking a low dose of antidepressants, if you want to read about that, that's in my book, Thinking in Pictures. And it's available in ebook, easy to get ebook. And if the medication alone doesn't do it, but a burst of hard exercise. I used to do 100 sit-ups on the bed, and then my sciatic nerve was hurting me. So now I'm doing modified push-ups. Do I like exercising? No, I hate it. But to get up to 100 sit-ups, that took a long time to work up to that. I want to emphasize that. I started out doing like 3. That was 6 months to work up to that.
Wow,
and
I'm impressed.
But if I don't do that burst of hard exercise, then I have trouble with sleeping. And I found that I'd added up like how much airport walking I did. That just doesn't seem to do the same things as the burst of hard exercise.
I've been listening. You said that when you were with us on the 2nd of April, and I've been trying to add a burst of hard exercise, and I find that it's helping me too, Temple. So well, you've inspired me.
Work up to it slowly. I don't want anybody having a heart attack here.
No,
I want to emphasize working up slowly, but there's something, and I think there's starting to be some scientific evidence about a burst of hard exercise where slow walk, I have to get myself breathing hard a bit.
Yeah, love it. Okay, somebody's written in and said, I am autistic, but diagnosed as an adult. I am 30 now, was diagnosed 2 years ago. I know that whenever I was a child, I was reading before my 4th birthday, but did not speak until I was 6. When I did finally speak, I was speaking on the same fluency as my peers. And I believe that the reason I was able to speak so well was because my immediate family still spoke to me and would have conversation with me as if I was able to use my voice. What do you think about that, Temple?
Well, I think that's important. One of the things that, Soma did with Tito, and how can I talk with Soma? She took him everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, they were from India, so they go on the outdoor markets and railroad station and all kinds of places like that, noise and stuff. She took them everywhere, and we got to get these kids out doing things. Now, what do you do about the sound sensitivity? Well, I think I may have talked about that before. Give the kid control. Let the kid turn that dreaded hairdryer on and off, and then he's going to find it fun to blow things around the house with it when he can control it.
Okay. We're getting a couple of questions for your mom, which is really great. But I would sort of love to know your opinion on this. They're asking, they want to ask your mom, how do you teach hygiene? They have a daughter who's 18, high functioning autism, has to be reminded about deodorant. It bothers me that she's not mindful about daily care. Now, clearly your mom taught you manners, and she, because you are a professional And, you know, hygiene is a very big deal. I've heard you lecture about people presenting themselves cleanly and getting their hair taken care of. What do you think made that important to you? Was it something that your mom did, or was it something just in you?
It's something that a guy in the construction industry did. There's the scene in the movie where the boss slams down the deodorant. And they actually took two bosses in the movie and combined them. It was actually a construction boss that did that. And I wanted the job. And he basically told me I had to clean it up. It was that simple. And I wanted the job. And that's something. Now, back in the 70s, they had these gunky, awful roll-ons. You know, now the solid sticks, you don't even feel them. There's no excuse for not using solid stick. And I get the unscented type. No, you have to clean it up. It's just that simple.
Do you think it's better coming from somebody other than mom, or do you think it could be from anybody?
Well, the thing that made the big difference on me, it was this was a job I really wanted. And he slammed down the deodorant just like it was shown in the movie and said, "You stink, use it." Exactly what he did. I showed Mick Jackson, the director, exactly how to slam it down. And I realized I had to clean it up.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't mean that you have to become a different person. I still dress eccentric, but you just can't be a rude, filthy slob.
Do you consider the way you dress eccentric?
Well, it's a little different, but it's important to you know, look presentable, and you know, dirty, filthy T-shirt, that's not okay. You wear a T-shirt, but it needs to be a clean one. And
I seem to recall that there's a story about when you went to go to the Emmys. Was there discussion about what you were going to wear about that? Am I crazy?
No, I wore a shirt that was a gift from my sister. It's a my top was Ralph Lauren. My bottom was Walmart. Black Walmart. One of the reasons why I wear Walmart dress pants is because they don't itch. I got to have pants that don't itch. And they make really nice dress pants and not very expensive, but I thought that was kind of funny to have Ralph Lauren on my top and Walmart on the bottom.
Was there somebody who was pressuring you to like wear a ball gown or?
No, it wasn't. I wouldn't wear a ball gown. No.
I mean, it's, in this day and age, I think everybody is allowed to dress how they want to dress.
I was dressed up. There actually was a Ralph Lauren shirt that my sister gave me, and that's the reason why I wore it.
You looked great.
Yeah,
you looked great. And when Claire won and you stood up, I think we all cried. We all were just like beside ourselves.
And then I grabbed the mic and I said, "Mom, I know you're nervous. Stand up." And then the boom camera came over and took a picture of her. And she stood up.
There was an amazing moment. I'm sure it was an amazing moment for you guys, but it was an amazing moment for all of us, Temple, to see you in that way. It was like winning the Olympics for all of us.
It was absolutely wonderful. And one thing with that movie, they got the right team together, and Emily Gerson-Sains, she's the one who put that whole project together. And what I learned, you know, you get the right people doing stuff, things come out good. The stuff that's the most accurate stuff in the movie is the visual thinking is shown absolutely accurately. The projects are accurate. Some of my stuff that doctor scene, and Mother hates that doctor scene, is not accurate. She actually went to a neurologist, and I was recommended to get speech therapy. But what the doctor scene was typical 50s. Right. But the work stuff in the movie is probably the most accurate stuff. And I like the fact it shows visual thinking accurately so people can understand visual thinking.
You know, I think it's the first time that most people got it, that they were like, oh, and I think a lot of us went, oh, I completely understand that because my brain does that to a degree. Yeah. Like I'm visual too. And I was like, oh, well, my brain does that. It just does it in a slightly different way, but I think visually too. And it made a certain amount of sense for all of us. It was a gift to the world. Well, and I think did as much.
See, Mick Jackson, the director, was a visual thinker, but because I have another big concern in education is with all the algebra requirements, we're screening out visual thinkers. And we got a gigantic shortage of high-end skilled trades today. These are essential. These jobs are never going to go away. Somebody's got to fix the heating and air conditioning, do plumbing, electrical, fix cars. build things with steel. That stuff's
Yeah.
not going to go away.
Okay, we got another question. My daughter is 11 and just diagnosed. It took a long time for professionals to believe us. Why do girls get diagnosed later?
Well, I was just reading on the autism magazines about this. Well, girls tend to be more flexible in their thinking, and they just don't show it. And one of the problems with girls with autism is getting into abusive relationships. That can sometimes be a big problem.
Yeah. Any advice for how a parent might deal with that?
Well, I have a book. I was sorry, I'm a shameless book promoter, but I did a book.
No, please. We love your books.
I did a book with Sean Barron, and he and I kind of have two different kind of takes on some of the dating stuff, and it's called The Unwritten Social Rules from Future Horizons, and one of the little rules they've got in there is not everybody that acts like your friend necessarily is your friend.
Yeah.
And that can be a real big problem area. I can remember other girls would get me to read private stuff to them, and then I found out they were laughing about it. That was in college, and that was very difficult to deal with.
Oh, yeah, no, that would be upsetting. Since you brought it up, I'm going to ask you, but you can tell me it's none of my business and I won't be offended. But since we're talking about dating, would you be interested in talking about any experience that you have had in terms of dating?
I basically, it's not part of my life. When I was in college, I did a little tiny bit of dating with one guy, but I just saw too much abusive stuff going on. Too much drunken angriness. I never saw a marriage I could see myself in. And what I've basically done in my life is I've replaced emotional complexity with intellectual complexity. So when there's a problem, I want to go out and research treatments for COVID because I'd like to not die, for example, or go out and reach something else like book distribution or some other thing. Because one of the things I really like doing is finding practical ways to solve problems.
Yes. Yes, the first time I met you, after we were done with the interview, you were asking me questions about, did my husband and I ever get like dating time? Did we ever get to go out alone? And I was like, no, Temple, we don't have anybody to watch our son. And then you started giving me marriage advice. You started saying to me, no, you're going to have to figure this out. You're going to have to, trade with another mom. And, because you have to have time with your husband where you're not talking about your son. And I started to laugh. And you said, what are you laughing? And I said, I'm just having this wonderful moment where I'm realizing I'm getting marriage advice from Temple Grandin. And you said, I'm a problem fixer. I like to solve problems. And I've never forgotten that. I'm still happily married, probably thanks to you, Temple.
I didn't. Okay. It's one of the things that Mother has talked about is having time for the siblings. Okay. My sister's a year and a half younger. And the other ones there was a big enough gap in age that I don't think there was much effect. But the one that was a year and a half younger, I was getting the attention and she wasn't getting enough attention. And that there needs to be time for the other siblings to get and do something they want to do.
Are you still close with your siblings, Temple?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I've been calling up Katie and Izzy and talking about what's going on in New York right now. They live in Manhattan, New York.
Yes. Well, as I said before, we're having your mom on Friday and we're taking questions because later on today, I'm going to go over questions with her. So if you guys have questions for her, be writing those in after the show so we don't confuse them with these. Okay. My son has trouble when we used to go out to stores. He gets overwhelmed. How can I help him? He's 4 years old and he can read. He always wants to play with my hair while we're grocery shopping. How can I help?
Well, I think probably the grocery store's got a lot of noise. Now, one of the things with sensory oversensitivity, one thing that helps is giving the kid some control. Okay, let's start off with going to the store maybe when it's not so busy. But then on the other hand, if he starts to get overwhelmed, maybe he can have a signal. And if he gives that signal, then she'll take him out. In other words, giving him the control. See, this is the same thing as the kid doesn't like the vacuum cleaner. You let the kid turn the vacuum cleaner on. Or the kid doesn't like buzzer on the scoreboard in the gym and you go down there when nobody's there and you turn the thing on where the kid controls it. Or you can have your headphone, you got it with you, but you want to try not to wear it. In other words, but it's with you. Again, yes. That gives you control. And then gradually you'll get to where you can tolerate more and more supermarket. But because some of these things can be desensitized. I remember mother saying in one of her talks, she said, well, I got upset about some cannons that went off at the circus, but she took me back there again anyway, because I kind of liked it. You know, you don't want to shove them into these things. And one thing she did do, we did not have noisemakers at my birthday party. That was an accommodation. But you take the dreaded thing that makes the noise. And if there's a situation where the kid can control that thing, because what it is, it's an excessive startle response. You know, like I'll be in the airport and somebody opens one of the doors wrong and it makes that horrible noise. I flinch now, but I tolerate it. But you give them some sense of control, and then I'll gradually try to do more. And then maybe if he stays in the store a certain length of time, he can buy some little thing in there. So there's then a reward for tolerating the grocery store.
Okay, this is interesting. Somebody wants to know, do you still believe that at least one of the parents of an autistic kid is autistic or has traits of autism?
Oh, autism is a truly, truly continuous trait. And I see autistic traits in parents all the time. But it's a true continuous trait. You see, a brain can be more thinking, or a brain can be more social emotional. What point do you slap a label on it? There's also a link genetically with intelligence and some autistic traits, because to be really social eats up a lot of processor space in the brain. So where do you allocate it? But everything I've been reading now about genetics shows truly a continuous trait. You know, there is no black and white dividing line between, okay, computer nerd and autism. In fact, the name for the same thing in a lot of cases. And then, of course, you get down where the kid remains nonverbal. Yes, that's definitely, he's definitely got a disability there.
So then, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is it that because we think of autism as being this spectrum, so do you feel like everybody is somewhere on that spectrum?
Well, probably not, because I think it's basically sort of a spectrum between them being more of a thinking brain or being more of a social brain. It's just how you allocate the resources in the brain. You got some people who are super yakety-yaks, probably don't have any of the traits or barely would have them.
Interesting.
It's a truly continuous trait. Because it takes social stuff takes a lot of processor power.
I've never really thought about it that way before, and that's very illuminating. How can children of any age with autism learn the benefits of having siblings?
Well, let's do activities together. We did some good activities. We used to go skating together. We go out on the hill and take turns using the sled. Again, this is teaching turn taking. I talked to one family, and every weekend they do an outing. The autistic kid liked roller skating, I think it was. Well, the siblings then going to get choice to maybe do something different on another one of the weekends. You know, so if there's 3 kids, then he gets to pick roller skating every 3rd weekend. But we don't go roller skating every weekend. Maybe you don't like skateboarding, but then you're going to have to sit and watch it. You know, because you've got to take turns picking out the movies. I've talked about what to do when they're locked up in the house. Well, watch the International Space Station. Living on the International Space Station, tight quarters.
Yes.
Tour of the bathroom. It's not that fun.
You got me hooked now on there, because there's a website, you guys, where you can go and it's Life on the International Space Station. And they have videos that are just for kids, but they're great for everyone. And you got me hooked on it because you were describing for me the one where they were making the peanut butter sandwich. But they have all these different videos that you can watch, and then they have lesson plans that go with it too. But I like this idea that you had when we spoke to you last about it, this being in close quarters. It's just like being on the space station, and that they have to make parts of their day where they do different things. Like you emphasize that they have to have part of the day where they get to be alone.
They have to be alone, and they have a very big exercise requirement, like about 2 hours a day of exercise, so they don't, it's really bad for their health being weightless all the time. Over the years, they've collected some musical instruments and things. They have time to do hobbies. But one thing they have, and I've actually got sent a schedule of the astronaut schedule on the space station. They have what's called the midday meal, where everybody is going to eat together, and that's scheduled. And And then they have times they got to work on their experiments. They have time where they can get on the internet. I mean, the space station's going round and round, so it's going to be going in and out of service. And they're going to know just exactly when those points are in the orbit. That's the time to do a video call real fast. Just like cell phones go in and out of service on the road, space station's going to go in and out of service as it goes around.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Somebody says, thank you for being a role model for my daughter. She stopped violin practice today to watch this. She said that she is a lot like you were when you were little. Is it ever hard for you, Temple, that you are such a role model, especially to everybody, but especially to girls on the spectrum? Do you ever feel like you have a lot to live up to?
Well, I feel it's a responsibility. I've had people ask that. I've always got to behave myself. It's a responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got to take that responsibility really seriously.
Absolutely. They're wanting to know what you're enjoying in your free time right now. Like, what's your favorite free time thing to do?
Well, I've watched some of the episodes of the new Jean-Luc Picard Star Trek show. Now they're just getting involved with the Borg right now. I've always been a Star Trek fan. Also love to read my science magazines and business magazines. I was reading those this morning, read a really sad story about the flower industry. Since all the weddings are canceled, they've just had to destroy all the flowers. It was the saddest thing. And I read that this morning in Business Week, and very sad.
It's so interesting how interconnected so many things are. And when you pull, a rather large thing out, like people going out in public, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about the flower industry and those poor people who make their living, because I'm sure that their sales have just gone right through the floor.
Well, they had to chop them up and take them to the dump, is what or to the compost pile. Really, really sad. And then other things in supply chain, meat plants getting infected, warehouses getting infected. Some places do a better job of controlling it than others. And one of the things that's been a very effective method for like places where you have people grouped together on not getting sick is if you're sick, they pay you not to come to work.
Yes.
That will drastically reduce the infection rate of some of these really important things that we have in the supply chain.
Yeah, I've been watching as they've been showing that some of these meat packing plants are closing, and with the one where they said they'd had over 600 people diagnosed positive with COVID.
And I'm in that industry. I can't mention any names. I'm not going to mention any names, but basically I have been watching the figures on meat plants, also on all the supply chain things. I've been looking up the figures. And what I have found is when you pay people to stay home when they're sick, that will drastically reduce the infection rate.
There you go.
In these super critical things in supply chain. And then things like the poor flower industry, which was definitely considered the saddest thing. They had to throw away their entire crop, lay their people off. Really, really sad.
Well, and of course, we're seeing that the pictures that they were showing of the farmers having to dump all their produce too.
Terrible.
And throw it under. Horrible, because there are, we know that there are going to be some shortages and people who can't are pressed.
Well, let me just explain a few things about that. Horrible. I saw the pictures of milk tankers dumping in a field. I saw that. Vegetable crops being plowed under. I've seen all of that. Okay, what happened? Let me just explain some things about supply chain. So I am in the food industry. Where the restaurants shut down, then there's a huge amount of milk that they no longer need. And a lot of that went to restaurants. And the way the supply chains work is you have giant warehouses. Okay, imagine Amazon, but it's food. It's food, all food. Big, huge, gigantic warehouse for food. I've been in it.
Yeah.
I've been in the biggest one there is that distributes to what they call food service and institutional. In other words, that goes to cafeterias, it goes to restaurants. So that supply chain is set up, and I've got a no name policy on this.
Sure, absolutely.
You'll see their trucks. They have big trucks that bring the stuff into supermarkets, bring it into restaurants. So when the restaurant business fell, okay, now this supply chain set up to bring truckloads in to the back side of restaurants of supplies. Now, in order to, now the soup kitchens were screaming for food right now at this point.
Yes.
And so they really, really needed it. So we'd have to figure out some way to get that big distribution warehouse for the food service, we need to make, like pandemic planning now. Now, unfortunately, we've learned this the hard way, so that they can then divert that to food kitchens. Now, the problem you've got with the milk is that's unpasteurized product. You can't just sell that unless you want to get brucellosis and tuberculosis. I don't think you want that. That's the reason why you pasteurize milk. And if you want to drink raw milk, you better have a dairy that's very super good biosecurity. So you can't keep those diseases out. But you see then what happened when that supply chain shut down, then the milk processing plant couldn't process the milk. See, that's the problem that happened. And so let's say we have something happen again when restaurants are shut down, then you're going to immediately have to have another supply chain where that truck, instead of going to the back ends of restaurants, is going to go to the back end of the food kitchen.
Yeah.
But the supply chains weren't set up, and so the system just jammed. There was a learning thing there. No, I thought it was horrible. I saw that. Terrible.
Just yes, absolutely horrible. I don't know. Here in Los Angeles, what they did was, because we have a huge school program through LAUSD where a lot of kids get fed through the schools. And when the schools closed, what they did was they took that entire operation and began feeding anyone. That if anybody is hungry, there's 2 times a day where they can go to all these schools all over LAUSD and they can eat, which
you set up those supply chains.
Yep.
Then the big food service warehouse, gigantic warehouse, then just puts it into that supply chain.
Yeah.
You see, what happened is the thing cut off. Okay, you can't, the cows are going to still keep milking.
Yeah.
And then to figure out what we need to be doing for emergency planning now is figuring out how to divert that supply chain. But it took a while for the schools to figure out that they need to.
We need you in charge of the food chain. That's what we need. I
see it.
I know you see it.
I've been in all these places. I know how these supply chains work. I've been in these big food distribution warehouses. I've been there.
Well, I remember when the whole thing happened with the nuclear power plant in Japan. And I heard an interview with you right afterwards, and you said, if an autistic person had designed that nuclear power plant, it would never have been flooded. You said you took one look at it and at the plans, and that you could tell why the water came in. And I remember thinking, why don't we should have somebody who has the way that you think on every single team so that we can see around.
Well, that's why you need the different kinds of minds. You see, what I've learned about the mathematical mind, they calculate risk. They didn't see the water filling up the basement and drowning the electric pump that cools it. And when I was young, I used to say they were stupid. It's not stupidity. The mathematical mind just doesn't see the water filling up the basement. I see the water flooding the site, the doors bust open because they're not going to be able to withstand that water pressure. And 2 seconds later, the basement's flooded and the equipment's drowned, and the generators that run it are drowned.
Yes. Well, that's why you're right. That's why we need all the different kinds of minds. And now I'm going to ask you to tell us about your book, The Autistic Brain. Okay. Do you have that one sitting there?
No, I actually don't have that one sitting there, but I could probably run and grab it real quick. Want me to do that? Okay.
We'd rather have you.
Okay.
Let's just talk about the book, because they can get it right now from Future Horizons. But what will they find in that book?
Well, actually, last time I looked, the Autistic Brain was available in the Amazon warehouse. I just checked that. But so you can get it there, I think, too. Ebooks, all your ebooks, they're all at Amazon. Audiobooks, there's no problem with ebook and audiobook supply chain. It's only physical books. But the main thing I talk about in the Autistic Brain is the different kinds of thinking. I'm a visual thinker. That was shown in the HBO movie, what's called an object visualizer, if you want the science term, object visualizer. And then another kind of thinker is what's called the visual spatial. This is your mathematical mind. This is your pattern thinker. This is going to be your computer programmer, your more traditional kind of engineer. Then you have the word thinkers. Now, when I was young, I thought everybody was a visual thinker like me. Mm-hmm. Well, I've learned that that's definitely not the case. Now, the things that visual thinkers are good at are art, design, but also high-end skilled trades. When I look back at the projects I did with some of the very large meat companies, I'm going to estimate that 20%, the welders, the designers I worked with were either dyslexic, autistic, or ADHD. I know 2 people that I'm almost positive are autistic, own large metal fabrication companies. Now they're retiring. They're not getting replaced. We're losing skills. We don't make elevators anymore. Check out the new hotels. Well, now hotels are getting repurposed, to quarantine people in. But when you look at who designs different stuff in a large food factory, any food factory, you have a part of it that I'll call the clever engineering department. That's the super clever packaging machine, all the conveyorized systems. And then you have the more mathematical parts like boilers and refrigeration. Every plant I worked for every major meat company. The visual thinkers like me that often weren't very good students in school made the real clever equipment. And that's a skill we're losing.
Yeah.
Okay, we were talking about warehouses. There's a lot of conveyors and stuff in warehouses, and it comes from Germany because they've kept skilled trades. Some of our top, what I call the really specialized equipment in the food industry is coming out of Europe now. It used to all come out of here. And I think it goes back to schools taking out the skilled trades and the hands-on activities 20 years ago. We're paying for that now. And this is something that until COVID got on the scene, I really talked about this because we need our visual thinkers. And I just talked to a mom of a kid. Her boy had F's, horrible student, but she was a robotics coach and he could never pass algebra, but she managed to get him into an auto repair shop and learn he's fixing trains now.
Yeah.
Okay, that's another back door. But we need these visual thinkers, and they're getting screened out of the educational system. I am very concerned. And in my book, The Autistic Brain, I give you the science for that. And since that book's been published, there's a whole lot more science on the difference between the object visualizer, if you want to look this up on Google Scholar, and the visual spatial. Those are the scientific words when I talk about the visual thinker and the math thinker. So that's the main thing in that book. And we need our visual thinkers because things like this horrible thing, like dumping the milk. Well, this is the sort of thing visual thinkers can help you solve that because I actually see the supply chain. Yeah. Okay, the milk processing plant tanks are full, so they turn away the deliveries. Then they have to dump them. Okay, so you've got to get the whole supply chain working. Then the schools, it took the schools a while to figure out they could be feeding centers. Now we know that. Now we can take those same trucks and instead of delivering to restaurants, they can deliver to schools.
Yeah,
we can just reverse that supply chain. But the problem is a very high volume supply chain. And if you don't make the plans up front, we need to be solving this problem.
Hey, have you ever been to my son does competitive robotics. Have you ever been to one of those robotics tournaments where the robots?
I've seen them on TV.
Sometime I got to get you to come with me to one of them. He was supposed to, his robot had, his team's robot had won and they were supposed to go to the championship in Houston, but that was supposed to happen last week and it all got canceled. But sometime I'm going to tell you where they are so that you can go to one with us. It's so much fun.
Well, but Temple, robotics is the kind of things that can get that kid. See, when you look at the robotics, there's 2 parts of the robot. There's the mechanical engineering part, that's the visual thinking part.
Exactly.
And there's the programming, which is the more mathematical part. I'd work on the mechanical part of the robot.
Exactly, which is what my son does. Temple, I'm realizing we're past the hour mark. Now we are going to continue on with the show, and you're welcome to stay with us if you want to stay. There are more questions.
I can stay for another 10 minutes, and then I'm going to have to go.
Okay, great. So another question here. My son does not speak and was diagnosed with autism when he was 1.8 years. He's now 5.5 years. What can we do to make him speak? We feel that he understands, takes us to what he wants, points finger, murmurs some voices, kind words, but doesn't speak. What can be done? Please
doesn't
advise.
Speak at all.
At all.
Okay. Well, there's kids that can't speak. He's got to have a way to communication. There's the various electronic devices, picture boards, picture exchange. Some people are using sign language, but we got to give them a way to communicate. And then if a kid has any speech at all, You always want to encourage him to use his words. Let's say he wants a juice. You say, use your words, but you got to give them time to respond. These kids are like a slow internet connection. They take time to respond. And then there's some that are not going to talk. Some of these kids can just learn to type with something as simple as a text messaging program on an iPad. I think the phones are too small for kids, but you could just use a tablet computer with a text messaging and put it in airplane mode so they can't send anything. And some can just learn to type on that.
Absolutely.
And that's what Carly, there's another book written by a nonverbal named Carly's Voice. It's another book, Carly's Voice.
Carly Fleischman, yes.
Carly Fleischman. And she just learned, she types very slowly, but she types independently. That a text messaging program, that's something that costs nothing. But I would recommend a larger device than a phone.
Yeah, Carly, for those of you who don't know, Carly, when she was very young, they didn't think she even understood the alphabet. She didn't understand the concept of one as far as they were concerned. And when she was 13 years old, she took a computer from one of her caregivers. And this is like having never communicated in any way. She typed out, "My teeth hurt, please help me." So she clearly had been understanding some things and just didn't have a way to communicate. And then, of course, they gave her a keyboard, and she's brilliant. Brilliant. She's the one who interviewed Channing Tatum a while back, you guys.
That's the thing that some of these kids can learn how to type. And same thing with Tito. Now, he types very fast, and then he gets up and he runs around and flaps, and then he has to rest a little bit because it takes tremendous, both Carly and Tito talk about tremendous effort is required to concentrate to do their typing.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about friendship. We have a lot of people writing in about friendships and relationships. Somebody says, I have a 17-year-old that doesn't have friends outside of school or sports. Not sure what to do. What advice do you have? And other people asking if you would tell a little bit about what friendships have been like for you and have meant for you in your lifetime.
Well, when I was in high school, I got a lot of bullying and teasing where I had friends who shared interests. And they were horses, model rockets, and electronics. And to get friends outside of school, let's get involved in something where there's a shared interest. One innovative teacher started a Star Wars club in her school. And for the autistic kid, friends who shared interests, find stuff that you like to do together with other people. A lot of my friends, they're in the autism field, they're in animal behavior. They were construction people. We used to love to just sit around and talk about how to build stuff. We also like to talk about how stupid the suits were too.
So similar interests.
Yeah, similar interests.
Wonderful. I think we talked about this last time, that there was a great study years ago that came out of Santa Barbara talking about bullying, and that that when you have friends, you're more bully proof. And that one thing that a parent can do is facilitate a club at your child's school that's something that they're interested in. So if they're interested in a particular video game, that make a club about that. And or if they're, and that then they make friends. I don't know if you know the Peers program, Temple. There's a great program out of UCLA that's called the Peers program. And it's simultaneous tracks where the parents are taking a track on how to support their kid being friends and social, so that it helps them to realize when they're making a mistake. And then the kids are taking a track at the same time. And it's really brilliant. I absolutely love it. And they're offering right now to do that online with you and with your kiddos. So that's at UCLA. So check that out. The Temple, can you tell me about equine therapy and autism? This is Carrie asking.
Well, there's some individuals that really respond well to equine therapy. And I find that how does autistic kids respond to animals, there's 3 different ways. Love them, a little scared at first, then love them, and then maybe not appropriate. And that's usually sensory. You can't control when a horse might whinny, for example, where I can control maybe when a vacuum cleaner's turned on. But there's parents that have said, my kid did their first words on a horse. Now, I realize that's just anecdotal data, but I've probably heard that 7 or 8 or 9 times now. And one of the things we need to figure out is what subgroup responds that way. In the horse, you have balancing and you have rhythm. And those are 2 activities that stimulate the cerebellum which is involved with timing stuff throughout the brain. There's a lot still not understood about the cerebellum. And that may have something to do with it. But for some kids, it's just the best thing you can do. But again, one size doesn't fit everybody. And right now they're building a new equine center. They did break ground on it recently. One of the things I'd like to find out is what kind of a subgroup responds that super well where you're getting that speech. I've heard that anecdotally enough times. You can't just poo-poo that off. Something's happening there, and we need to find out what kind of kid that works with.
Well, there's something about animals. I know you're a big animal lover. That's been the large portion of your life has been devoted towards animals. But I feel like it's similar to how I feel about the autism community. Animals don't lie.
No,
they're just exactly who they are, and they tell the truth 100% of the time, which is what I feel about individuals that I've met on the autism spectrum.
well, and I've talked to one mom of an autistic kid. She says, my autistic son, he was nonverbal. She says he's best buds with a dog. I don't know. They're just like on the same wavelength. You see, that has nothing to do with speech. Well, you see, an animal's world is not verbal. And when you look at some of the research now, people are still fighting over animal consciousness. I've been following some of that literature. And I read a paper that an engineer wrote. They don't deny animals' consciousness. But then you write something from the psych department, well, highly verbal. I start looking at author affiliations, and I am finding that papers written in highly verbal fields don't have a hard time believing that animals are conscious the same way we are. And I think it has to do with verbal. This is actually being debated right now.
I know.
I just downloaded a paper just the other night that an engineer had written, and he says, oh, dogs are conscious. But I think it gets down to how big of a pedestal you put verbal thinking on. And I've discussed this as a visual thinker, but I don't think you have to be a verbal thinker to be conscious. And to me, just looking at some dogs yesterday, to say that this red dog is not conscious is just ridiculous. And I think it gets down to how verbal the person is, because this is being seriously discussed right now in scientific literature.
I know, and it baffles me. I don't understand how an intelligent person who has been around dogs or horses or cattle can think that they don't think or that they don't.
See, this is where I'm a total visual thinker, but you're taking somebody who's super, super verbal. And I've talked to some where they don't have any visual thought at all. Maybe they have a hard time imagining a dog is conscious, because a dog lives in a sensory-based world, not a verbal world.
Yeah, but
it's being seriously discussed now.
I know. I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Scientific journals.
I know. I don't understand it. Okay. Everybody's saying just how cool it is to have you here on the show, and they say, "I love the Good Doctor." One person is writing, wants you to know that it's going to be 15 years in September that they were diagnosed with Asperger's at the age of 24. They want to know, have you seen the show The Good Doctor?
Oh, yes, I have. Yeah. Yes, I did.
And what, do you like it?
Well, I think in some things he could probably maybe learn a little more quickly. I mean, I learned I couldn't call people stupid at a project meeting after I got some counseling from plant engineer and some other people.
Yeah. I had mentioned that on Thursday, we're having Kobe Bird on the show. He's that 17-year-old actor. He was on The Good Doctor. And he's now on a show on Netflix. It's a hit show called Lock and Key. Temple, have you seen that show yet?
I have not seen that show.
I got to tell you, I think, because we like a lot of the same things. I like Picard. I like Star Trek. I got to tell you, I think that you will like this. It's a very fun show. It's called Lock and Key.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
And Kobe plays the character of Rufus on it. And it's based on graphic novels that were written by the son of Stephen King. Did you ever like any of the Stephen King stuff?
Yeah, I've read a lot of Stephen King stuff. Yeah.
Now, sometimes that's too much for me, but this is written by his son and has a huge following, but I think that you will super enjoy it. And I would love to hear your opinion of that later on.
Well, I have to get the show up. And okay, you have another question there, quick?
Okay, what are your thoughts on authentic, and this goes right along with it, authentic representation in entertainment? So when you see someone in a show, let's say I'm Picard and they're playing somebody who's deaf, do you feel like that should be first considered someone who is actually deaf playing that role? And when you see characters on screen playing autism, like for instance, Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man, he played a character and he was acting. He was playing somebody who was on the spectrum. When Claire Danes played you, she was not an autistic actor. How do you feel about people who are on the spectrum playing people who are on the spectrum?
Well, I'd like to see people on the spectrum play in shows, but I'm not gonna. I'm more in the middle of the road on a lot of these issues, and Claire Danes, I thought she did a great job. She like channeled me. She became me, and I've actually counseled Dustin Hoffman. He looked at Joe Sullivan to see what autism looks like, and I talked to him about the sensory issues and the anxiety issues. And I remember I said, Dustin, imagine how anxious you were when you went to your first big audition. Now just imagine if you had those kind of nerves all the time for no reason. This was stuff that I told him. And yes, I'd like to see people that have a specific diagnosis or whatever, be in these shows. But on the other hand, I'm not going to say never do a Claire Danes or a Dustin Hoffman. I'm going to be more middle of the road.
Well, I'm with you right there because I want to see those individuals get the first opportunity. I want to see them have the opportunity for the employment and all of that and authentic representation. But I also want to leave room for someone who's on the spectrum to be able to play someone who's not on the spectrum. And I think once we say, oh, if it's the characters on the spectrum, it has to be played by somebody on the spectrum, then we're also going to be saying that people who a character is not on the spectrum cannot be played by someone on the spectrum. And I never want to see that happen.
Well, the other problem you got with the movie industry is they want to put a star in the leading role.
Yeah, well,
that's something they're going to want to do. So it's going to be a lot easier to bring them into a supporting role.
Yes,
the movie industry wants to put a star in the leading roles. Now, there's some situations where they put a non-star in, but no, I'm going to be more flexible. I sort of like the same thing we talk about, being in a regular classroom or a special school. I want to see kids as much as possible in a regular classroom. I will tell you something I don't want to see. I don't want to see a 12-year-old fully verbal that ought to be maybe in a gifted program in a class with people that don't talk and have problems dressing. Yeah, that's not okay, because that kid's not going to go anywhere. But I want to do inclusion just as much as we practically can do it.
Yes.
But then I don't want something, see, I visualize things I don't want. He's sitting in the back of the regular classroom, just doing stems and not learning anything. That's no, but you see, I see specific examples of scenarios that I would consider not acceptable.
Yeah. Well, Temple, I've kept you way longer than I said that I was going to keep you. And I know that you've got other things to do today, but can I just tell you how much we appreciate you and how much we adore you and how much we how meaningful it is to get to spend this time with you. It's just so wonderful.
Really good to be here. And thank you so much.
All right. And let's go to a robotics tournament. Let's go back to Houston to a robotics tournament.
I think
and we'll see NASA again.
I'd like to do that. Okay, great.
All right.
I think I'm going to keep the meeting now. Okay, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye, Temple.
Bye.
I'm going to stay here with you guys. Bye-bye, Temple.
All right.
Bye-bye. I'm going to stay here with you guys. And isn't she incredible? You guys can still be writing in questions for her mom. I got to go over a couple of things with you guys. And then we want to give a shout out to a really good friend of ours who had something really remarkable happen in the last couple of days. But I want to start by talking about the fact that tomorrow on the show, we have Dr. Doreen Granpichet, and she will be answering your questions live. And so you can be writing those questions in during that show or during now, whatever you'd like to do. But then on Thursday, we're going to have Kobe Bird here, and he's the young actor that I've been telling you guys about. We first had Kobe on the show Autism Live when he was an actor, and he was doing a project with the Miracle Project. And he came on, and I remember just being I fell in love with him. And I hadn't met his wonderful mother yet, but I just thought that he was the cat's pajamas, you know what I'm saying? And he was funny, and he was fabulous. And I'm sorry, I'm trying to look up something at the same time. But then Kobe, we had him back on the show because he did something called, I think it's called Broadway Dreams. And he was one of a very few number of actors across the country who were chosen to go to New York to be in a showcase in New York. And so he came back on the show to talk about that. And by that point, I'd become friends with his mom, and he had become friends with my son, and he's such a good friend. And then, it was like, look at Kobe. He's already going to be doing something in New York City. And then it was like, we snapped our fingers. I know it wasn't like this for him at all. It was a lot of hard work, but he had a role on Speechless. Then he was given a bigger role on The Good Doctor. And now he is this wonderful Rufus on Lock and Key. If you guys haven't seen Lock and Key, you need to go and watch it because there will be spoiler alerts. And I don't want to be spoiling it for anybody. So go and watch you some Lock and Key. Now, if you watch the show compulsively, you know that we did this series on card heroes, and we were talking to one of our card heroes, and we were asking, what do you do to de-stress? And she said, I watch Netflix. And I said, okay, I'm just curious, what are you watching on Netflix? She goes, oh, it's a show, Lock and Key. It's so good. And my head exploded, and I was like, no, isn't it the best thing? And did you know the Kobe Bird? And, he's been on Autism Live before. We love him. And that was why I was like, oh, we got to have Kobe on to talk about this. So we're going to talk about all of that and ever so much more with Kobe on Thursday. And then on Friday, it's Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and we're having Eustacia Cutler. So that is Temple Grandin's mom, and you can be asking questions of her, but I got to have the questions today because a little bit later on this afternoon, I'm going to be going over the questions with her, and we're only going to pick a handful of questions because we're working on something bigger for you. Yes, I said it. We're working on something bigger because she would like to answer all the questions you guys have. It's just that we can't do that in a very short period of time. So all those things, but we want to give a big shout out this morning to the fabulous Christina Adams. She has been a semi-regular on the show. In fact, we feature a segment with her that is called Autism and Beyond. And Christina came into my life first because I read her book. Her first book was called A Real Boy, and it was a real game changer for me. It spurred me to do a lot of what we did with our son. And I carried that book with me everywhere. I had to go buy several more copies of it because first I wanted to keep the war-torn copy that was given to me, by the way, by Logan Shepard's mother. Let's give a shout out to Logan as well. And if you haven't watched his newest video, you should go watch Logan Shepard's. But Logan's mom gave me her copy of A Real Boy, and it became my everything, right? I never went anywhere without it. And I had to buy several more copies because I kept giving them every time I would meet an autism mom. That would be my gift to her, right? Because that's what Crystal did for me. Well, then we started having Christina on the show, and having her talk, in one of the subjects that she's talked about a lot over the last few years is camel milk. She got very involved in camel milk for her son on the autism spectrum. And we kept saying, when are you going to write the book? When are you going to write the book? Finally, she wrote Camel Crazy, A Quest for Miracles in the Mysterious World of Camels. And that is out right now. It is an amazing book that you need to buy on Amazon or wherever you get your books. And recently, her book won an incredible award. It won the Nautilus Book Award. And so we just want to give a big shout out to her for that. It is tearing it up in across the world because it's very popular in many different places. So the Nautilus Book Awards involve highly esteemed authors and publishers from across the USA from over 20 nations around the world. This year's achievement is more notable due to the record number of entries and diversity of high quality books. The organization states that it's truly encouraged by the new perspectives these books present with which to co-create a better future individually and collectively. And so it is one of the winners of a Nautilus Award book. So congratulations, Christina Adams. And we just want to do a big shout out, Camel Crazy. And the subtitle of the book is A Quest for Miracles in the Mysterious World of Camels. And congratulations to Christina. There is the book right there. I've always loved camels. I don't know what that's about, but from the early age, I just thought camels were really awesome. I know they spit, but how can you not love the face of this camel? How could you not? So definitely check out this book. It's a great read, and we love Christina. And honestly, it's a really cool thing. Okay, I'm checking time because we're like close to out of time. Traven, what do you think? We were going to do the jargon at the end of the show. We've got 5 minutes. Should we go ahead and go for the jargon of the day? Because this is what we usually do at the start of the show, but we didn't want to have you have to wait through jargon, and Temple needed to go early. So, okay, let's go for it. So we do something, jargon of the day, where we take on one phrase, one acronym, and we try to take on what it means. We give you the actual definition. Then we give you a working definition after we make fun of the actual definition. So are you going to put it up on the screen for us here, Traven? So our term for today is functional pretend play. And I don't know, like the first time I heard that, I was like, functional pretend play. It sounds like you're trying to take play and make it boring, right? And you might see that there is the potential for that, right? But let's take a look at what our actual definition for functional pretend play is. Do you remember when we used to have toy stores? Because I'm going to talk about toy stores here in a second. I can't even talk anymore. I'm so excited. Functional pretend play. It's using lifelike objects in a purely functional, socially conventional way to imitate or act out common action sequences, right? Yawn. How can we make play as boring as possible, right? But let's go on to our working definition here to see if we can get a better hold on this. So functional pretend play is playing with toys that are lifelike in a lifelike way. So remember when we used to have Toy Stories, I can't talk anymore, you guys, toy stores. And there were just aisles and aisles and aisles, and each aisle had a theme, right? There was the doll aisle, and then there was the Lego aisle, right? But there was that one aisle that I never found particularly fascinating, that it always kind of made me go, what's that aisle about? Where they would have the toy vacuum cleaners. And I remember going, why would anyone want to get a child a toy vacuum cleaner? It's like vacuuming is my least favorite thing in life. Why would I want to get a child a toy to play vacuum? It was because I wasn't in the know. That part of what, and we want to do this with all children, but especially our kiddos on the autism spectrum who need a little bit more help sometimes connecting one thing with another thing, right? And play is supposed to be the place that we can all fail and have it cost nothing, right? So we want kiddos to be thinking about what they're doing and what other people are doing, right? We want them to be able to perspective take. We want them to take on other roles. And the beginning of that is when we do functional pretend play. So when you get a kiddo a fake cash register, right, that looks like a cash register, but it's all plastic and you push the buttons and it goes ding, right? But it's not a big, expensive, heavy cash register, right? We now have a place for them to play and to fail and have it cost nothing. So we do want to have kids learn through example. So, dad is vacuuming. We want for, the child to have a play vacuum cleaner and to be able to vacuum right along next to dad. We get I love now the Melissa and Doug, they have all these food boxes that, there used to be those like horrible plastic food things, but I love the Melissa and Doug stuff because it has food and it comes with a plastic, well, it's a wooden play knife, and you can slice open the orange and then you can Velcro it back together and slice it open again. These are all great skills that we want our children to be working on. And we want for them to want to be able to imitate things that other people are doing. There is no better toy for our young developing children than something from that functional pretend play aisle, because we're going to take all the things that we do, like eating lunch, and we have the plastic or the wooden bread with the wooden, we featured some in our toy guide that are really good fabric, corduroy fabric. But and then you pretend to I'm eating, and that begins to teach a different kind of rule-oriented play for our children, helps with flexibility in their brains. So functional pretend play toys. We don't have that aisle in the store anymore, but you can still find them online. They're great, great toys and help with a whole lot of things. All right, we are just about to be out of time, but again, wasn't this a great show? I must say, I just so love getting to chat with Temple, and I love for you guys to get to see her live. Is there anything better than that? Don't forget, tomorrow, Ask Dr. Doreen with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. Get your questions answered. Thursday, Kobe Bird, wonderful, brilliant actor. And I'll tell you, you haven't even seen him sing. That boy is some talented sing, I tell you. So he's going to be with us from Lock and Key on Thursday. And then on Friday, you Stacia Cutler. And she is Temple Grandin's mom, and she's going to be answering a few of your questions. But she's going to be talking about the 4 things that we all need to know, that we all need to be teaching the people that we love on the autism spectrum and helping to support them with. She's also going to talk about the origins of the social aspect of autism. You're not going to want to miss it. And she's going to answer some questions, and we're going to tell you about how she wants to answer more of your questions. But write in questions for me right now, because those are the questions that we're going to pick from for Friday. And let me just say that next week is equally off the chain. Just off the chain, y'all. So we're going to finish April strong. And then we will continue on in May, because autism is not just 1 month out of the year, right? All right. I appreciate you all for being here with me and the excitement of all of this. And we will be back tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
There is a certain way you approach problems. Okay, I was talking to some people this morning about how to get auto shop back in the schools when the schools can't afford it. And I suggest we get a retired mechanic to do it in his garage. And then we have to worry about, well, is there going to be liability or something? And then I started visualizing some important safety.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
I forgot that.
This will happen too. Then we'll be back. I like to dance. Good morning and welcome to this very special edition of Autism Live. We have to go with this new format. We have to go live, and we always have the choice to mute. And we have with us Dr. Temple Grandin, and she was saying, "Why? No, let's just stay." But then I apologize for the opening segments and the disclaimer. And we interrupted you in mid-sentence too, Dr. Grandin. But thrilled to have you here this morning. The topic this morning that we're going to be focusing on is finding and feeding our children's passions. And this is something that you guys write in questions for Dr. Grandin all the time. It's an area of her particular expertise. We're thrilled to have her here with us. Before we jump into that, I've been talking with all of you on a regular basis here and with Dr. Grandin the other day about our dear beloved Joanne Lara, who is gravely, gravely ill. And You know, we had the opportunity the other day. There were some wonderful people who said some really shout outs to her. And I asked Temple if there was anything that she would like to say to Joanne, because she's had the opportunity to work with Joanne on a couple of different things. And you kicked off her passion project when she started Autism Works Now. She asked Temple to come, and the kickoff event was called Temple, Grandin, and Friends. And Temple came and gave such an incredible speech at the Nokia Theater. And there were so many amazing dignitaries there. And it was just like the perfect beginning. And we all had t-shirts that said, "I'm friends with Dr. Temple Grandin." It was such a big, big event that started this movement towards getting employment for individuals with autism. But Temple, is there anything that you would like to say?
Well, I'd just like to say that she was somebody that got things done. I really liked the glorious pie truck, because I think a lot of things that are going to work are going to be more local things done in the neighborhood. I'm going to be doing a talk to judges, and a lot of kids get in trouble. And people ask me all the time, how did I get interested in the cattle industry? I was exposed to it when I was 15, when I went to my aunt's ranch. We're supposed to be working on developing kids' passions. I think in a lot of cases, kids are not getting exposed to enough stuff to figure out their passions, because the schools have taken out auto shop and welding and art and cooking and sewing and drafting and all of these kinds of classes. So we've got to start doing things in the neighborhood, like maybe have a retired mechanic set up a shop. And we got to talking about how to deal with liability. And I said, yes, I've worked in industrial safety. There's certain safety things I got to have, like a special container for greasy rags so you don't have fires. I want gloves on the kids so they don't get into solvents. They don't have to have them on fixing the carpet. If they're messing with solvents, they've got to have gloves on. Yeah, there's a few safety things. I want to do those. But we need to figure out how to just do things in the neighborhood. And something like the glorious pie truck, that's an example of something that was done in the neighborhood, very creative, and it wasn't that expensive to start, and it can slowly grow.
Absolutely. And, Joanne was all, devoted her life to making sure that individuals with autism, first she started with the autism movement therapy, and was doing that not as just a dance class, but a dance class to help them to link their body to their brains. And so Joanne has been a passionate fighter, making sure that the kinds of things that you talk about, Temple, came to pass. And I think we all want to just say a big shout out to Joanne, how much we love her. And I can't imagine a world without her, but that is imminent. And I know, we had talked about this, and you just wanted an opportunity to just, give that little shout out to her, because you're right. She was somebody who got things done.
Another thing she's done in her career is writing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Write about how to do it. Because I've done a lot of things in my career. I've been in the meat industry now for 47 years. And I would design a project, and then I wrote about it. And there's a scene in the HBO movie where I get the editor's card, because I realized if I wrote for that magazine, that would really help my career. Then I have to figure out, why is this project newsworthy? Now, I couldn't write about every single corral I designed, because a lot of them were just more of the same thing. But something where I had something original, like my entrance design on that dip vat, I wrote about it. You see, and there's a lot of people doing some really clever, good, innovative neighborhood things, but they're not writing them up. I've seen some very innovative stuff done in schools. They're not getting the stuff written up on how to do it. And I just wrote simple how to do articles on how to design cattle handling facilities.
But you're right, Joanne did write about it, and we're so thrilled that there is a book that details the autism movement therapy method. And there is also a wonderful book that she co-wrote with Susan Osborne that's really the Autism Works Now method, where it's teaching pre-employment skills to 14 to 17-year-olds.
Yes.
Both of them are available on Amazon, and we encourage people to look at those, because Joanne's work lives on in those books and in so many other ways. And thank you for saying that, Temple, because I think we all forget sometimes that it's important that not only to do something, but to write about it so that others can learn from the things.
No, this is the thing. So others could do it. I went to a little talk that a really innovative teacher did on teaching history by having all the kids doing all kinds of making Egyptian things when they studied the Egyptian history. And I said, you need to make a YouTube video of what you just told us at this little, book signing thing that I went to. Just do the same thing, do it on YouTube video. I don't think she ever did. She gave the greatest talk. I wish it had been recorded, but then somebody needs to professionally edit the slides in there and do it nicely.
Yeah.
So that other people could do it.
Yeah. And, I think a lot of times we get caught up and there's the hours in the day, but it's important to prioritize. And this week has really taught me that, because I love Joanne so much. And I know that she had a lot more work that she intended to do. But, for all of us, there's a time when the work needs to end, and to be that what's left is what the impression you made on people, but what you put in writing is there forever.
Well, it tells people how to do stuff. A lot of people just don't know where to start. And what am I doing this summer? Because we're still pretty well locked down. I have to go to a special webpage for even allowed to go on campus. I'm writing a new book on visual thinking and why visual thinking is important. And the movie showed how I think visually. And I'm worried that our visual thinkers are getting discriminated against because we absolutely can't do algebra. You don't need algebra for skilled trade. You need old-fashioned 6th grade arithmetic the way they used to teach it. That you do need. Yeah.
Well, and I want to segue into, because this is the topic that, goes hand in hand with this. This is the topic for today that you and I had talked about, that that you felt passionate about, and that so many people have written questions in about. How do I find my child's passion, and how do I feed their passion?
All right. The first thing is, how do you find it? I think a lot of kids today are not getting exposed to enough different things because the schools have taken out so many activities that they're not going to find the passion. When I was in high school, cattle wasn't anything I even thought about. I got exposed to it. Horses, again, I got exposed to them. What if I'd not been exposed to them? And I'm seeing too many kids today where the only thing they're exposed to is video games, and they're getting completely addicted, and they're not going anywhere. If they were becoming great game designers, I wouldn't be criticizing it, but that's not what's happening. But taking the hands-on classes out of the schools, music, theater, all of these kinds of things, worst thing they ever did. I think we've got to start getting these things going in the neighborhood.
So in this COVID time and during this summer, for these families that are listening to this and they're like, okay, I'm revved. I've got the time. I've got a little bit of time this summer. I want to find my child's passion, but I can't take them places. Because I know you're a problem solver. So let's come up with some things that they can do to expose their kids to things, to see what they're passionate about.
All right. First of all, gardening is taking off right now. That's something you can do. People are remodeling their houses. So Home Depot is probably having a great time right now selling stuff for that. Building things, camping in your backyard. And then, of course, I've got my book, Calling All Minds. It's also about famous inventors. And there's things that we can do. Build things, art, we can do that. Take a programming class. There's all kinds of free classes online on Khan Academy. Wolfram Mathematica, a real great mathematics site. And if you want to turn on the math kids, look up protein symmetry on Google Images. Protein symmetry. I just looked it up again the other day.
You got me turned on to that.
Windows are inside your body. It's like, but let's just get creative. I was reading just in our local paper about how the neighbors were doing things together. They were keeping social distancing, but they were doing things together.
I've met more of my neighbors since this happened than I had in the year before I lived here, because people are connecting with each other across the fence.
That's exactly what's happening here in my neighborhood. I'm meeting people that I'd never met before.
I love it.
And they're out walking their dogs, or they're playing catch out in the grass.
Let me ask you something, Temple. Have you ever done any of the virtual, when you put on the virtual glasses and you get to go someplace like to the Grand Canyon?
I have.
And what do you think about that for the autistic mind? Do you feel like that's a beneficial thing, or do you have concerns about that?
Well, I think in moderation it would be okay. but it's not the same as doing it. They had a demonstration of Facebook had a demonstration of super virtual reality. They had the Denver airport, and I went and I tried it. And now this was probably 4 years ago. I thought the images were blurry. But the thing is, when I turned my head, the image, that was realistic. I could do this.
Yeah.
I also got kind of disoriented and I had to hold on to the wall because I
Yeah.
was afraid I was going to fall. Yeah, there's things we can do with virtual reality, but it's not going to replace doing real things.
But there's a lot
let's
of
introduce tools to kids. this summer.
yes.
Let's learn how to use tools safely, or we learn how to use watercolors, or some different art things. But I'm finding we got a lot of kids today, they haven't even made a paper snowflake. That's one of my beginner projects in my book. They haven't even done something that simple.
I love that. Hold the book up again and tell us where we can get it.
Well, and Amazon's got it, and also comes in a paperback version that's a bright yellow. It's the same book, except it's bright yellow. It also has patents in it and talks about famous inventors. So you learn about how people patent things. It has projects ranging from simple stuff like the paper snowflake, the little airplanes and kites, and the optical illusion room is in there. That's one of the difficult projects that's in there. But let's get kids building things. How about learning cooking?
Oh my
Let's
gosh.
do something like
cooking.
that.
We need cooking happening this summer, that's for sure.
Well, let's do that. Let's learn all the life skills on that's the kind of stuff that we need to be doing. There's a lot of stuff you can do.
I don't know if you've seen, because every year we put out a toy guide to recommend things, and there's a company, and of course I can't think what their name is right now. I'm going to Google it and find it, but they put out STEAM kits that they're basically erector sets that are for us to build a specific thing each month, and it comes in the mail. And the kids get it, and they've got these beautiful guides, but it has everything they need to build a Ferris wheel or build. They're really cool kits. I don't know if you've seen
cool, but then again, I want them building something from scratch too. We made all kinds of stuff from scratch, and just scraps of wood, nails. When I was in second grade, I was cutting coat hangers with a pair of pliers. I was not allowed to use a saw in second grade, but I was using screwdriver, hammer, and pliers, scissors, and
what were you building?
Well,
what were you
one of the
building
things I was doing with coat hangers is I wanted to make and it's in the Calling All Minds book, a parachute that when I threw my little parachute up in the air that was made with a scarf, it wouldn't open. So I made these spreader bars like this out of bent coat hanger with bent ends. I could barely cut it, and I had to make a dent and then do this. And I made the spreader bar just right. And what's interesting? I have found patents of spreader bar things for real parachutes. But I was doing this when I was like in second grade. To make and that project's in the book, and I just did it by myself. Nobody helped me. This was something I just figured out on my own. And I'd make a different design, then I'd chuck it up in the air. And when we did the book, we recreated that. And some of my little projects weren't as easy to recreate as I thought they were going to be. Really? Kids need to learn to tinker, but let's just start doing things.
But part of the other thing, because we said finding the passion, but then feeding it. And one of the things that I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about is that your mother, when you were in second grade and deciding to cut coat hangers, didn't say to you, let's not do that.
Now saw wasn't allowed and knives were not allowed. There was some rules. I could use the pliers.
But you were cutting
the
wire,
hammer, the screwdriver, and nails, screws.
Yeah.
And
I got to tell you that when my son was 3, he sat underneath. I don't know how. Well, first he started taking apart flashlights, and anytime there was a flashlight or a remote control anywhere, he would take it apart, and I would take it away from him because we needed the flashlights and we needed the remote controls. Then he got a screwdriver and he sat underneath the dining room table and was taking it apart. And because I didn't know you then, was like, no, and hid the screwdriver. Now I wished I.
No, what we would do now, let's get some screws from the hardware store, screwdriver. Let's get him a Phillips too. So he learns there's a Phillips screwdriver and a regular screwdriver. And by the time I got to third grade, I had a little egg beater drill like this.
Yes.
And and some tools, and they can start to screw things together, do stuff with bolts.
Well,
You know,
now he's
old enough that
17.
He's not going to try to eat them or something.
Right. Now my
Okay.
son is 17 and he's on his competitive robotics team, and he's got an
Cool.
outlet for that. And he went to his local maker site for a couple of years and learned how to do CNC, and we fed the
Good.
passion that way.
Good.
But when he was little, I didn't realize that I needed to be, he wanted to take apart the vacuum cleaner.
No, let's get him some old vacuum cleaners that are his that he can take apart. In other
Right.
words, and they have to be unplugged. There has to be a very strict rule about that.
Yeah.
Because I was taught, you never hit anybody with a hammer. I was taught how to use tools safely. The only thing you hit with a hammer is a board or a nail.
Yeah.
That's the rules. But we have kids growing up today that don't use tools. So how are they going to know they like tools if they never use them?
Yeah.
I think Legos are great, but I think when you're 16, you ought to be building with some other things too. You could combine Legos into other things that you make.
How do you think you start that? Like, let's say that you got a 5-year-old kid, because I think part of the problem is, Temple, that I wasn't really raised to know how to use tools, and neither was my husband. So if we don't really know how to use the tools, what do you think is a safe way to start with our
All right,
little
it's a
one?
thing called a play school workbench. You start with
Okay.
that at 2. And they
Okay.
have like giant plastic wrenches that can do bolts with heads that big. Play school.
Wonderful.
It's totally safe. And you get those toys. So that
Okay.
introduces the idea of tools. Now, another thing, let's say you have a kid that's a math kid, and he's in 4th grade and he's doing baby math and he's bored, and nobody thought to introduce programming.
Yeah.
You got Scratch programming for kids. It's free. You
Yes.
can go, you want to find out how Minecraft works? Then learn to program in JavaScript. You can buy a book really inexpensively on Amazon. I have looked them up.
Well,
These
that
are
leads me
hard
into
things
a
to do.
question
So
that
get back, you got to expose them. You got to
Yes.
expose them.
Well, that leads me to a question that I wanted to ask, because a dear friend of ours wrote it in from Autism Will Not Define My Son. She says, "Hi, Temple. My son is 10, nonverbal, but almost there. He is excelling at school in math, and he seems to really like it. She says, math was my worst subject in school, so I'm not sure where or how to guide him, especially as he grows older. What things
Give them a harder math.
There she goes.
Don't
But she
give them
says,
this crazy verbal math they have now. Get the old-fashioned math books that are just all numbers, not this
Okay.
weird verbal stuff they have now. Old-fashioned math books. Dig them out of the attic somewhere. He'll probably
Okay.
eat them right up. I don't
'Cause she's-
understand. Algebra book? I use that for doorstop. But you give it to some other kid,
yeah,
it can open a
Okay.
gigantic door. But you
Okay.
don't know until you expose.
okay.
That's the thing.
So, because she says, what can I do to help increase his math skills and keep him excited about it? But mom's admitting that, like, this is me too. I got to be
She doesn't
honest.
have to know anything about math. Take him to the Wolfram Mathematica site.
Say that
Wolfram.
slower.
Wolf, like the animal, the
Yeah.
animal called a wolf. Ram, like a male sheep. Wolfram Mathematica. It's a great website. I was just on it just the other day. I looked it up again.
Okay.
Look
Wolfram
up
Mathematics.
fractals. Use
Fractals.
Google Images when you look this stuff up. Man, you'll
Okay.
find the cool math stuff. You just have to expose them to it.
Okay.
You don't have to understand it. You give the kid an algebra book. You don't have to understand it. Just give it to him.
And,
You
and
just
see,
have to find
and
it
he-
and give it to him.
and he might use it as a doorstop too, but if he
Then
doesn't,
it's not to him. Then
right,
it's not to
right,
him.
right.
But you don't know until you expose. Because when I look back at a lot of big innovators that really, really, like you take like Elon Musk here, he grew up in a family that had a workshop and tons of books. Thomas Edison was described as a hyperactive adult high school dropout, but his mom homeschooled him in a library full of books. There's been engineers that self-train themselves with their grandfather's textbooks, but they were there in the bookshelf. So the kid could pull them out and look at them. See, again,
that
it's
amazing?
exposure. So you
Yeah.
don't know until you expose. And what worries me today is kids aren't getting exposed to enough stuff.
Well, it's true, especially now, because while we're social distancing, I mean, I used to take my son to museums on a regular basis. That's why I was asking about the
But
virtual
let's
glass.
go. What museums all have websites now.
Exactly.
Let's go explore some of this stuff on websites, and let's do it maybe with somebody else while we're going to go look at the Louvre or look at whatever.
Yes. A lot of people are asking if we're actually live now, because sometimes we play your recorded interviews, but I just want to point out to everybody that this is Tuesday, June, what's the date? The 9th. And so we are live Tuesday, June 9th. People are writing in how much they love you. They're saying that they hate video games, that you're amazing. They can't wait for your new.
Well, let me tell you a little
visual
something
thinking
about
books.
Mr. Musk right here.
Yeah.
Well, you know all about, oh man, I geeked out on the SpaceX. I was glued to an iPad. I was over at Mark's house. So I was glued to this iPad, and they scrubbed the first launch because of the weather. The next launch, I'm glued, and I watched it live for full 20 minutes till it was safely in orbit.
Right.
And you know why those spacesuits were so cool? Because they were made by a costume designer.
Isn't that
I
wonderful?
wanted to dress them up really, really cool. And I geeked out on 3 hours of live docking. 3 hours of live docking. I geeked out on that. Totally geeked out.
I love that.
But
But
okay,
did
let's
you-
go back to
go
this guy.
Yes.
Okay. How did he avoid the video game addiction? He's 48. So what
Okay.
I actually did is I figured out that he loved video games. But at the
Okay.
age of 48, he would have been looking at Mario Brothers. I went back and I played the video games, late 80s, early 90s, that would have been the right age. And they were the kind of games that were a lot less addictive. Because what he wanted to do was to open a video game store and sell them. And the shopping center wouldn't let him sign a lease because he was too young.
Oh my goodness.
He wanted
I
to
didn't
sell
know
video
that.
games. But they also, those old games broke all the time. So you'd get the blue screen with all the code on it.
Yes.
Well, you see, I call that a computer showing the guts. And then you start to get interested in that code. They don't see that today. He's just old enough. To have avoided the video game addiction. And I went through, I probably played 6 or 7 of them. I didn't actually play them, but I looked at the YouTube videos of, the popular games that he would have been playing.
Yeah.
And he would have been like between 10 and 17.
Well, it's interesting, because those were the video games that I was exposed to too. In the beginning, I didn't get them. I was like, what is the thing? But when I keyed into the fact that there was a level of problem solving in them, like you had to figure out
how to
how.
learn with video games. But the problem is these kids are getting so sucked in. Any benefit, there are some benefits with video games. Any benefit you would have, you'd get in an hour a day.
Yeah.
And
yes, you're absolutely
in
right.
my book, The Loving Push, that I did with Deborah Moore, we've reviewed some of the research. Also in the brand new edition of The Way I See It, I revamped the video game chapter. And unfortunately, kids on the autism spectrum are more likely to get addicted to video games than just any other kids. And they're not having good results, because what I'm seeing is there's 2 paths: to the basement to play video games, or we get out and have a life.
Yeah.
And Elon Musk loved science fiction. He just loved it. So he had to dress up the astronauts as superheroes. I just love it. Daft Punk helmets. I geeked out on the whole. And then did you see the inside of the spaceship? No knobs and dials.
I know.
All computer screen in front of them.
Isn't that amazing?
Super, super cool.
It was super cool.
But that's
Have you gone to a launch yet?
Yes,
Temple?
I actually have been to a launch. I did a disability conference at Cape Canaveral. I guess they used to call it Cape Kennedy. I guess the original name was Cape Canaveral. I think they're using that now. The other thing is, had to launch from Cape Canaveral, pad 39A. There's only one launch pad in the whole world. This is cool. It's 39A, because that's where the moonshot went off from.
Right.
Had to be pad 39A. He owns launch pads, but they're not cool.
Right. Well, there you go.
I do it at that launch pad, but I went to a SpaceX launch. This was about 2.5 years ago. Very, very cool. I got inside the vehicle assembly building. I completely geeked out on that. But they need us visual thinkers, because they were just finishing up a launch pad. I got to go inside it, and I found something in that launch pad that shouldn't be there. That's why you need visual thinkers.
What did you find?
7 o'clock in the morning, and you know what I found in the launch pad? I watched a raccoon come out of it and waddle down the steps off into the bushes. And the
Stop.
first thing I thought is, what have you been chewing? And I said, did you see that raccoon? He overnighted inside the base of your launch pad with their equipment.
What did they say?
Well, you better make sure he hasn't chewed stuff. I'll tell you what he'll chew. He'll chew tool handles. Okay, that'd just be annoying because he's going to chew the stuff you've touched. But if there's some wiring in some box in there and you've left it open that you've touched a lot, he may have chewed that. And you need to inspect that really carefully. See, this is why the mathematical engineers need the visual thinkers.
Of
Because a
course.
mathematician, they won't see the raccoon, but he could cause a mission to screw up.
Oh,
And
for heaven's sake, yeah.
It was a total geek fest. I got very emotional. I stood in front of the vehicle assembly building. I was crying, and I was like crying for happiness during the, I'm so glad Elon Musk managed to pull that off. That was just the coolest thing. And I was nail biting the whole way, just like because, don't have anything go wrong. And then that night I found a cell phone video of someone had taken to Elon Musk, and he's in the control room at Cape Canaveral, and he's glued to the window. Then he bends over and he's like doing this to the computer while looking for stage separation.
Right.
So once they're safely in orbit, they can relax. But I was nail biting the whole way.
We were too, and we were emotional, and people are writing in saying that they were emotional. It's a new era. But the thing that killed me, did you watch on the live feed? Because there were all the things that were happening at the same time, but there was the piece that was going to land on that's
the first booster.
Right. And then they were like, it's coming, and you could see it coming, and you could see it slowing down, and they had the shot on the boat, on the drone. And then all of a sudden everything blipped out, and then
I think you see those cameras, something may have burned up, or you don't.
Yeah, but it was like David Copperfield.
He landed those things, and when I went to Cape Canaveral 2.5 years ago, one of those boosters was on the lawn, just dumped on the lawn in front of an airplane hangar. We went by it because they have to let it cool for 3 days, and then it's everybody out of the office to clean all the junk off of it.
That's amazing. Well, it was so exciting, and we geeked out on it too. But the whole time I was like, Temple's got to be loving this.
The thing that amazed me is that then he showed them there was, and I've seen those land before, that when it was falling, like maybe at this angle, and then the computer would start to write the rocket like this, and then it would go down.
But then it blipped out for a second, and then it was there, and I wanted to see it land, but we didn't get to see it land.
I don't know. Now, I don't think anybody was deliberately trying to.
No, I don't think
they
were.
They glitched out. You've got an awful lot of stuff going on there. The camera may have fried.
Yeah, it might have, but it was like a David Copperfield trick. I love talking about.
It's not a trick. They're actually landing them, and the thing that's so cool is because a 1950s rocket. That's how they land.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
That's how they land. But the thing was just I thought it was so amazing to hear it's falling like this, and then they just watch it straight, and the computer straightens it.
And I hope that people my son's even though the original launch got scrubbed and then it was on a Saturday, my son's school sent out emails to us with the link and said, please watch this with your children. And I hope that everybody gathered their kids around to watch it. That's what happened to me when I was a kid. My dad woke us up in the middle of the night to watch the moon landing. And I was just like 6 years old. But that's part of what we do to find our kids' passions, because
this gets back to exposing them to this stuff. Yeah. I remember as a little kid, we had one of the first TVs in the neighborhood and watching Queen Elizabeth's coronation. I didn't really understand why it was important, but it was important. I mean, it was kind of fuzzy, black and white. I remember watching that.
And that had to have made an impression on you, on something to be exposed to. So I hope that, people are watching things like the launch and the docking and things like that with their kids, because that's exposure. Now, we did have a couple of questions that came in specifically about workforce, and I know this is a really important topic for you. Somebody says, how do you introduce the workforce to someone who's a runner? He's an eloper, escaper. Do you have any suggestions?
Okay, how I could use them in the workplace?
Well, how you would first begin to expose the concept of working.
Well, first of all, I got to find out, I don't even know how old the kid is. You see, I have to have more information, age,
Yes.
And then start to find out, well, how's he doing in school? What are the good subjects? What are the bad subjects? I'm not going to do a quantum mechanics where you need linear algebra. Okay, I can tell you how to find the paper. You got a little math head. You want to design the next generation of computers? You type in linear algebra, quantum computing. I have found the paper. I have looked at it and understand it. Linear algebra, quantum computing.
Okay.
There's going to be a kid where you show him that paper, he's going to take off. I'll use it for scratch paper because I don't understand it.
There you go. Well, I don't
This is
understand any
where
of it.
different minds can do different things. So I need to learn more about him, what kind of skills he might have. You know, there's a lot of nonverbal people. There's some that I've talked about this before that can type independently and they write beautifully.
Yeah. I think people also need to remember too that when people are runners and escape, there's a reason why. And if you work with people to figure
That's
out
right.
why they're running and what they're running from or what they're running to, then you're able to have a much better
Well, that's
control.
right. Then you got to figure out, well, when does he do it? You see, what
Yeah.
I've learned on trying to troubleshoot things, that's the engineering term for diagnosis. We're not supposed to diagnose anything, so we're going to be engineers. We're going to troubleshoot stuff. But I find all the time, and I'm right now just wrote another chapter from my new book I'm working on picture thinking. I don't know how many meetings I get asked by teachers, what do I do about autistic kids in the classroom? What do I do with my berserk horse or my crazy dog? Now, these are real questions I've been asked. There is no way I can answer that. What did the crazy dog do? Happy jumping on people or biting them?
Right.
Well,
right.
then the visual mind, I start to think of specific examples of a nasty dog or a happy dog. And the happy dog is on my lap or it's jumping on me.
Yeah. Can
And
you
then
come
I
and
have to ask,
fix my dog, Temple?
Well, first of all, I have to know what they did wrong or what they did.
I
don't
have
have enough information to answer that question.
I get it.
That's the problem.
I have a dog that's a rescue that she has issues from before. We've been to a behaviorist with her.
What does she do?
She's fine with us, but she thinks that she has to defend us from everything and anything else in the world, whether it's a fly or the UPS truck going by a mile away. And she's totally fine with us. I could stick my hand in her mouth. She would never bite me, but she can't be around other people. And now I need for her to be around another dog, and we're working very slow to do that. But I've adopted one of Joanne's dogs. That's the sweetest little puppy. He's here in the room with me for the show, but I need for this dog to get along, and we're going very slow. But if you want to come by,
the thing I always ask when parents ask me whether their kid's at the right school or whatever, the first question I always ask is the child making progress? Are you making progress with the story?
We are making progress.
You're making progress and you're doing something right if you're making progress.
Okay, all good. I'm sorry I sidelined about my dog.
No, but the thing is, it's the same sort of troubleshooting. But you don't know the kid can do that math unless you expose them to that book.
That's true. That's true.
And what I think happened with a lot of the math classes today is the verbal thinkers are, in a verbalized math, where some of these math heads just need the numbers. They need the old-fashioned books.
Yeah. I've only got you for 10 more minutes, and I know they're going to just hate me if I don't start addressing some of these questions, but, and it just jumped, and I hate it when it does that. But Tony had written in, let me see if I can find it, Tony, what you said. Okay. Hi, I am autistic and happy. Hi, Dr. Grandin. As you know, in order to develop skills better, people need to accept criticism and flexibility. In your experience, how do you manage it? And he says, take care and stay safe. Cheers, Anthony.
Well, I had a boss, there's that scene in the movie where the boss slammed down the deodorant and said, you stink, use it. That happened. Another time, my first job, I criticized some welding. And I said it looked like pigeon doo-doo. And the engineer at
Did you say doo-doo? Is doo-doo the word?
Harley Winkleman. I'll tell you, he did exactly the right thing. He pulled me into his office in private, and very quietly told me that was not appropriate language. I had to apologize for that. He also, I'd apologized to Whitey, the welder, which I did, but he also explained to me if I didn't like the welding, Whitey was his employee, and I should have gone to him to complain about the welding. So he explained to me sort of the chain of command, and then he made me go up to the cafeteria and apologize. Now, I didn't tell Whitey his welding was wonderful because it wasn't, but I apologize for the rude language. Harley was the perfect job coach. And he didn't yell and scream at me. He told me very quietly and calmly what I should do in private inside his office.
Well, but you accepted it and learned from it. This
Yes,
isn't
I
easy
did learn
for
from it.
everybody.
I
This
did
isn't
learn from it.
easy for everybody, but why do you think that you did? Was it something that you were taught?
Because
or was
I
that-
wanted the job. The same thing with the deodorant. I wanted the job. There was some things where I had to change. And one of the things that has to change is hygiene. There's that if you want purple hair, fine, but you cannot be a slob.
I'm going to say this because I've learned this from Joanne Lauren. We keep coming back to her, but Joanne has been so passionate from minute one about that all kids deserve the right to work. And
yes,
that all,
I would agree with that.
Kids deserve, her phrase was, they all deserve a seat at the table. But I watched, when I first met Joanne, I thought, well, there's probably some people who don't want to work. And I've watched as she has helped individuals that I thought were too impacted to work. And the passion, once they have a job and they understand the parameters, they fight to keep that job. But not everybody has that opportunity, Dr. Grandin. And like, how do we give them that first work experience so that they see, ooh, when I work, I have
well, you've accomplished something. Now, the thing is, my mind doesn't work. See, verbal thinking, you tend to overgeneralize.
Okay.
You see, picture thinking, I think of, here's a specific example. Okay, a nonverbal person. I'll tell you, this is a specific example. This is a real person. About 2 years ago, I went to visit a very, very progressive program. They had a lot of clients that were adults, nonverbal. And this client came with binders full of everything bad he'd done, run off, everything terrible about him. And they finally said to him, you want to run? I'm going to mark some ribbons on some trees. This is where you can go run. Mm-hmm. And then they gave him work that was physically kind of demanding, stacking wood. But it's also something where you were stacking wood for a purpose. It wasn't fake work. You cannot have fake work where you stack the wood and then unstack it. No, it was wood that needed to be stacked. So you were doing useful work. And they just worked, and the guy was there, and they threw the binders away. Yeah. They just looked at it real simply. And the guy went from being the most horrible behavior problems there was to now he liked the fact that he had a real job. The other thing you've got to do if you have a really bad behavior problem is you've got to rule out a hidden painful medical problem. That has to be ruled out. You could have acid reflux, you could have ear infection, you could have toothache. You got to make sure they don't have something like that.
I so agree. One of our regulars on the show, Yadira Calderon, wrote in and she said, Dr. Temple Grandin, keep supporting our teens and adults with autism and creating opportunity for them. Allowing our children to try different things is the best way to relate to them and discover their passion, not imposed. Based on strengths and interests, that's what I'm trying to do with my Rainbow Mo show. That's her daughter. And she said, so far, so good. Her daughter's doing
you've got to, when I was in third grade, it was obvious I was good at drawing, but I just did the same horse head over and over again. So mother said, well, let's draw the saddle. Take that interest and broaden it. You want to broaden an interest so it's not so fixated. And she introduced other media, watercolors, and they were just little kids' paints.
But you have a whole book written on the idea of pushing our kids.
Well, another thing that mother did, because my sister loved theater, is that she put on plays in the neighborhood in the summer. And she'd get all the kids in the neighborhood to come and they'd put on a play.
Yeah. And what was that like for you? What did that do for you?
Well, this was something she did more for my sister. I would be in the play. But she had a lot of the neighborhood kids involved in it. And making Halloween costumes, so making pumpkins, a lot of the stuff that she did, it was not expensive stuff. Now the plays were mainly done in the summer when it's vacation.
But you learned from it, even though it wasn't meant for you, you learned from it.
But I had to learn to cooperate, and the whole group had to work together on this. It was a group activity. There's probably about 5 or 6 other kids involved in this. But this is an example of something done in the neighborhood, and it wasn't that expensive to do it. It took time.
Yeah.
It took time.
And your your mom was working, you know, she was doing a lot and had a lot of kids that she had to take care of, but she managed to do that.
Well, and then you see, and now you've got people, but now the problem you've got with people at home is trying to juggle their job. I was just reading in Science and Nature on the career section. Okay, scientists are at home, you know, trying to get their work done. Now they can't do lab work at home, but they're writing and their statistics and things like that. And one of the things they've learned, a schedule. This is another thing from the space station, a schedule. You got to get up in the morning. Now there's 5 astronauts and 3 exercise machines on that station. So the schedule is going to have to rearranged, but everybody has to be at the midday meal. That's a rule on the space station.
Yeah.
They don't want them sort of sulking at opposite ends of the station.
Yeah.
Everybody eats at the midday meal. That's on the official NASA schedule. But they've learned they've got to put it on a schedule. That's been learned. There's been problems on space stations.
Well, I mean, and there's a certain amount of stuff that's rules for respect, mutual respect, and they've learned that they have
to do a ton of maintenance work on the station. They got to do their scientific experiments because 20 years ago on the Mir, they had problems. They let it get dirty. Stuff broke on it. Part of the station broke. It could have killed them. They had to shut the door on one session and seal it off. Real mess. You see, then the people working in Antarctica, they've learned the same thing. People working on research ships that are out there, they've got to have a schedule, but they also schedule some alone time where that person can do, where the different astronauts, you know, play the guitar. They've collected some instruments over the years, play the guitar or read a book or talk to their family.
Now, I had promised you that I would let you go at 1:45 because I know you.
Well, actually, I told Mark I was going to be late, so
well, there we go.
We can go a little bit longer. We'll be fine.
All right, fabulous. I appreciate that. Okay, so going back to this whole idea of finding your kids' passion, and now we've said, you know, you've got to give them opportunity, you've got to expose them to things, and you can't know until you know. I love our beautiful Spencer Hart, who was not talking, and her mother put Phantom of the Opera on just because it was on, and they discovered that Spencer is a beautiful, talented opera singer and has been to China,
but you
has
wouldn't
sung at the
know
White House.
unless you exposed. You see, this
exactly.
Is the thing. And you sometimes don't know. This is what worries me today is kids aren't getting, I mean, the reason I got exposed to the beef industry was when my mother got remarried when I was 14, that brought the ranch into the family. And if I had not gone to that ranch, I would not be in the cattle industry. It's that simple. That's a perfect example. It's strictly exposure.
So you got to keep throwing darts at the wall and just expose.
That's
Right. But what are we looking for that tells us, okay, this is the passion? How, like, what kinds of things?
Well, all right, let's just look at it really simple.
It.
Let's say you show a math kid the Wolfram Mathematica website and he just takes off in it. Okay. Or you dug that old algebra book out of the attic and he actually did it all, and you went and showed his work to the high school algebra teacher and he was amazed.
There we go.
It could be that simple.
But a lot of things aren't going to be the thing. You might hand the algebra book and it becomes the doorstop. So I'm
not going to handle the art kid the algebra book because I've talked before about the different minds, and that's in my autistic brain book. This shows the science that there really is. Visual thinkers are object visualizers. Object visualizers. These are the art minds. These are also going to be the skilled trades, mechanical, machinery design, people I worked with in construction. Then you have the mathematicians, your computer programmers, the more mathematical parts of engineering. Then you've got word thinkers. Okay, I'm going to be doing a talk with the judges group. They're all word thinkers. So I've got to try to explain to them what visual thinking is. And I'm not going to give the person who's totally into art the algebra book.
Okay.
And in the autistic brain book, I talk about careers, some of the different kinds of minds. I mean, I use a little bit of discretion, but you also got to figure out what classes is he good at. And a lot of the math kids are being taught baby math. So you have a kid's good at math, let's expose them to programming. Scratch programming for little kids, and then JavaScript. You want to learn how Minecraft works? Here's a book about how to do Minecraft.
There you go.
And you're going to quickly figure out what he is, or he's maybe going to be a word kid. So he's going to love the Harry Potter books.
Yeah. So let's say, for instance, you know, you sat your kids down and you watched the SpaceX launch. and your kid got like really excited and was jumping up and down and hand flapping, and you saw that, ooh, they really, really liked that. So then
All right,
once
first of all, I got to know the age of the kid.
so let's say that this, I'm just making this scenario up. Let's say that you got a, let's say that you got a 5-year-old. They watched the SpaceX launch and they got very, very excited. What's the next thing that you could do to sort of feed that passion?
Well, you could play with some water rockets
Mm-hmm.
to get an idea of, how rocket works. Now, 5, he's probably gonna be a little too young for the math.
Right.
There's math involved, just even with a water rocket. Those are things.
But even to get like a little,
and also, okay, let's use rockets for reading. All right, so he liked the SpaceX launch. All right, let's get a children's book about when we went to the moon.
right.
And we can look things up on the NASA website to see that. Well, let's use it to teach reading too.
Yeah.
Just read about the history of rockets, and actually the Chinese invented the first rockets. Just read about it. You see, that's taking that interest and broadening it out. I can get reading into it. I can get when it gets a little older, I can get some more complicated math in it. Those are simple things you could do with that. Because a 5-year-old could be an art kid and love that, or be a math kid and love that.
Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of times as parents, we're trying to get our kids to some mythical place that we don't even know what it looks like. But sometimes I think we miss the key, that this is what the kid is passionate about. Because I hear parents talking about, well, how do I get him to stop perseverating on X, whatever X is?
Take whatever it is and broaden it. Okay, first of all, tell me what it is he perseverates on.
Well, okay, it could be anything, but like parents will write in and say, for instance, my kid is perseverating on Thomas the Tank.
All right, Thomas the Tank. All right, that's a common one. All right, let's learn more about different kinds of trains.
Right.
You got freight trains, passenger trains, you got antique trains. Let's learn about the history of the railroads and how they first went across the United States. Okay, see how I'm taking Thomas and I'm broadening him.
Yes.
Into a much bigger whole section of trains, a whole great big subject of trains, where I can have reading in it. I can do simple math, calculate if a train is going 60 miles an hour, how long would it take to go from, Salt Lake City to Denver? Yeah.
But so just take it and like
take
happy,
that thing, take Thomas and broaden it. Now, if the kid's really young, well, maybe we're going to just learn about freight trains, passenger trains, and maybe old-fashioned trains.
Yes.
And they read some other train books, children's train books, to start to broaden. But you have an associative link back to Thomas, because Thomas is a train, after all.
Yes.
He's part of a train.
Yes. And so now people are writing in about what their kids tend to go towards. Somebody said, my son is 9 and he's into jigsaw puzzles. Is he a visual thinker?
Jigsaw puzzles may be more of a math thinker. I would I'd expose them to that Wolfram Mathematica site, and I'd start showing them some protein symmetry.
It's crazy. It's good.
It's protein symmetry. It's crazy. It's a magical keyword when you use it on Google for images. It's amazing. I just looked at it again the other day. I looked all those things up again, made sure they were still sufficiently cool. I would start
totally turned me on to that.
Maybe simple children's Scratch programming, which is
Yeah.
a children's free computer program. It's called Scratch. Let's start showing them that. Okay. All right. What's another one?
Okay, so another one, they say my son's special interest is Roblox, which is a game different from Minecraft, but he's also interested in Minecraft, and this one is very common for our kids, interested in the Titanic.
All right, that's fine. Okay, the Minecraft, how old a kid is this?
She does not say. Can you write back in, Lynn, and tell us how old your child is?
Well, if he's really into Minecraft, if he's a math kid, I'm going to expose him to Java programming.
Okay.
Because that's what makes Minecraft work. Now, the Titanic, I want to learn a little more. Why is he interested in it? Because the first thing I got to do figure is this an art kid, a math kid, or a word kid? And the thing that's been learned now about the object visualizer, which is me, who absolutely cannot do algebra, and the visual spatial, who's the math kid. Lots of people are mediocre at both of these, but nobody's super good at either one. There's a paper called Trade-Offs. Super good object visualizer like me well, programming, I tried it, couldn't do it. So I want to learn a little bit more about this kid. What is it about the Titanic that interests him? Maybe he might be interested in deep sea diving technology
He's
to go
10.
look at the Titanic.
Mom wrote back in and said he's 10 years old, Temple.
He's 10 years old.
Yeah.
Well, if he's a math kid, I want to expose him to programming. He's old enough to learn. Let's expose him to some real JavaScript.
Yeah.
And you can get books on that. Another thing, there's a magic word that you use in regular Google searches called forum. If you just type JavaScript into Google, you don't get much, but if you type in JavaScript forums, whatever thing you're interested in, maybe dinosaur forums, dog forums, I don't care what it is, but you type that magical word forum in a search, it will pull you up, some cool stuff you won't find otherwise. On the Titanic, I want to kind of, what is it that interests him? Do I take him kind of the engineering route? They're exploring the Titanic wreck. Okay, maybe someone was interested in the love story on, something on the Titanic. I want to learn a little bit more about it. If he's an art kid, well, let's do pictures of the Titanic. All right, if I'm an engineering mind, why did Titanic sink? There's engineering explanations for that. You see, you could go into, I could explore it from either an art way, more of an engineering way. There's a lot of different things. I could broaden that interest. I need to learn a little more about his favorite subject in school, because I'm not going to push the physics stuff if he's absolutely awful in math.
Right. Crystal says, my son is 7 years old, does well in math, but is obsessed with trains and transit. And we see that a lot.
Transportation is common. Trains and airplanes, you see the reason he likes to watch the movement. Well, I just talked about Thomas the Tank Engine. You're going to do the same things with trains and transit.
Yeah. I love the kids who study, they know the whole New York City subway map, and they know the train schedule for the Boston Transit. It's like amazing. Another person says that my daughter is also a jigsaw puzzle whiz, but hates math and is nonverbal.
She's nonverbal, but jigsaw puzzles, often pattern thinkers are really good at it, especially if they're good at a jigsaw puzzle that doesn't have a clear picture, that you're not creating a clear picture. So you're not like find the blue pieces that be the sky, or the green pieces that might be the grass. She hates math, but she's really good at jigsaw puzzles. But there's different kinds of math. You see, one of the reasons why I want to get you on the Wolfram Mathematica site is that it gets into the real true pattern thinking. Not this, I think what way they're doing with the math now, I don't understand what they're doing. The other problem we've got with some of the math now, I was taught to borrow in subtraction. And if I hadn't been allowed to mark the paper, there's no way I could do it. But then you have other kids where they do it in their head. Let them do it in their head. They don't think the same way.
And now we're getting questions about, because we talked about the perseveration thing, and you were asking, like, what are they perseverating on? And we've got a young man who's 21 who perseverates on mom. Mom does not have custody of him, and he constantly repeats statements saying,
and he wants to get back with mom.
He says,
he's fully verbal or not?
Well, he repeats the statements, mom is coming, but in fact, mom is not coming.
Well, yeah, he wants her. You see, that's just plain separation anxiety.
Yeah.
That he wants her.
Yeah. But it appears from what they've written that mom is not coming, is not able to come. And so that's really something for,
and it's not impossible even to talk to her on the video or something. See, I don't know what the situation is.
I don't know either.
And does he feel better if he has a picture of her?
There you go.
Yeah, let's just try to think of a card from her or something.
Yeah. Somebody in my family used to have separation anxiety. And so a child, this is a 21-year-old, but they gave her a hanky from that person, and she could put it in her pocket and take it with her everywhere, and it made all the difference.
Well, that's something simple to do. That's the kind of stuff I like to figure out. Maybe something like that could be done.
Okay. So we've only got a couple of minutes left here, and I know we got to get you to lunch. I don't want Mark mad at me, But
Yeah, I told him it's gonna be late, but I told him it's gonna be 15 minutes late.
Okay.
But
but so to wind this up, so important that we expose our kids to as much as possible, and that we watch when they're exposed what excites them. And then, as you were saying, feed that passion by trying to find as many different ways to pull that passion out.
Transportation is a very common thing that these kids like, but and some of it is watching the motion. Even now, like, I mean, I've been on, I'm thinking how many airplanes, I still like to watch airplanes take off.
Yeah.
There's just something really cool about it.
One of the things that I've enjoyed about getting to know you, Temple, is, I just think passion is the funnest thing on the face of the planet. And it's so easy to see when you're passionate about something, it's just so easy to see, it's recognizable. And I love it when we get talking about the things that you geek out on, the space things, partially because I geek out on them too, but it's just so fun to see how passionate you are about it. And I wish that as autism parents, we would take that and look at our kids in that way.
What you got to do is you got to broaden. So so that the fixation isn't so narrow. Let's learn about some different kinds of trains.
Yes.
We do math with trains. We can do physics with trains. If the kid's more of a word kid, we can read about the history of the railroad.
Yeah.
Or the word.
But what I want for the autism community is to start to embrace that. And as you said, broaden it out, but to stop. I think a lot of parents are embarrassed when their 14-year-old kid is into a toy that is more appropriate for a 7-year-old. And I think,
all right, but let's put, Thomas is just one of the world of trains.
Yes.
All right. So let's start learning about Thomas's friends.
Right.
All the big friends.
But let's see that as passion.
Just remember,
let's see that as passion.
He dressed the astronauts as superheroes.
He did.
And when the costume designer was contacted to do it, he thought he was originally doing it for a movie, and they designed the spacesuits. Then they had to bring the engineers in to make it actually work. And you know what I got to see during the 3.5-hour doc?
What?
They had they didn't show the astronauts putting the spacesuits on and off. They blanked out the video for that. And then when they were sleeping, the thing was just turned off. But when they got the spacesuits back on, one of them didn't quite hold the pressure quite right. And the controller was saying, now, did you see the white teeth on the zipper or the black teeth? You see, it was color coded. If it wasn't quite zipped up all the way, you could see this different colored teeth. And they said, yeah, we could see that, wasn't zipped up quite all the way.
I didn't get to see that.
Well, that was and they were discussing that. But they had to get the engineers to make them actually work.
I love it.
He wanted them to be cool. That goes back to things in childhood.
It absolutely does. And so those things that our kids are passionate about, I think we need to embrace them.
He wanted them to look cool. And the regular spacesuits don't look very cool.
I love it.
And basically all those suits are for in case the cabin depressurizes. That's
exactly. We adore you, Temple. You are such a gift to all of us. I hope you have a wonderful lunch. And we're having barbecue. Nice. I will share with our audience that you and I have talked about having you come back once a month to do this kind of thing on a different topic. And so we look forward to having you on in July, and we look forward to everybody being happier, healthier, and safer in July. But thank you so much for the time that you have spent with us here today. It's been just delightful.
No, it was really good. And I just hope I get people to kind of think about things differently.
Yes. Yes. And thank you for your wonderful words about Joanne. I will make sure that she gets to hear those.
That's good, because boy, she's someone she's done a lot of things. We got to just get out and do stuff.
Yes. Yes. Like Joanne. Everybody be like Joanne.
Right. That's right.
All right. Temple, love you.
I guess it's time for me to sign off now.
Yes. All right. You take care. Thank you so much.
I sure will.
All right. Bye-bye.
Talk to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. I want to say, wasn't that, I mean, it was just so much fun. And I'm sorry that, I do send her the comments afterwards. So if you wrote something in, please know that I do send those to her, because a lot of you send in wonderful comments about how much you love her. And there just isn't time during the show to read all of them, but I do send them to her. So I want you guys to know that. Also, I want to let you know that tomorrow on the show, we have Evelyn Kung, autism expert Evelyn Kung will be here to answer your questions. On Thursday, we're having Yadira Calderon back because she was so amazing last Thursday. We want her to join us again. And on Friday, we are having Matt and Nava Asner from the Ed Asner Family Center join us. It will be me and Nancy for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and Matt and Nava talking about things going on at the center. And we'll continue to update you about my dear friend Joanne Laura. Please, everyone, stay safe. I will see you tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.
I got to do the U-turn around the thing? Okay. So, Kelby, do I want the north entry or the south, or does it matter? Okay. Are we doing curbside bag check? Which way, Kelby? Left?
Yeah.
Kelby, can I go through the T? Yeah, I have a toll tag.
Then you go through the T.
Okay. What do you do that, like, you could just spend 2 hours doing and have it suck all your time?
Oh, I like to look up interesting research articles on animal behavior. Found a really interesting European papers on how wolves are different than dogs that I read last week that were very, very interesting.
Very cool.
Because I've always talked about a brain can be more social emotional or a brain can be more cognitive.
Yeah.
And the wolf turns out to be more cognitive, and we've bred the dog to be more social emotional.
How fascinating is that?
Very, very interesting. The wolves were very good at watching another wolf solve a problem.
We were talking a little bit about television before, and I cannot believe that what you said to me, what you like to watch on television.
Star Trek. I was a Star Trek fan when I was a teenager. I liked the Star Trek Next Generation. I was watching that when I was working on my PhD in the 80s.
And so
Total Star Trek fan.
what's your favorite series, and what's your favorite character, and what's your favorite
Mr.
episode?
Spock was my favorite character.
Love it. And what's favorite episode? This guy is
Let
going
me
to hate
see.
me.
There was a lot of good. My favorite Star Trek movie was the one with the whales.
Yes.
Yeah, I really
mine
liked
too.
that Star Trek movie.
And so sad that we lost Leonard Nimoy this year.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that you like to watch television. Do you like to go to the movies too?
Oh yes, I went and saw Gravity. There's certain movies that have to be seen in a theater, like
Yeah.
Gravity and Avatar.
Yes.
I went to see Inside Out in the theater. I really liked that movie.
What did you think of that?
I liked it. I think about how the emotions interact.
I gotta be honest, I had said after that I thought that it was gonna be a great tool for people to show kids on the autism spectrum about perspective taking.
Yeah.
About what it's like in other people's heads.
Well, no, it's more like how the emotions inside your own head sort of conflict with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I love The Wizard of Oz, and I love the idea of the ruby slippers. She had the way back home. She just didn't know she had it.
Yeah.
You see, and I think that's a metaphor for a lot of things. A lot of people have the ruby slippers, but they don't know they have them. They don't know they have the key that can open up the door to a lot of really great stuff.
So what would you say was your ruby slipper?
Well, I had, when some opportunities came up, like when I designed those dip vats, that was a major breakthrough for my business. And when the head of the feed yard came up to me and asked me if I'd do it, I said, give me 3 weeks. You know, a lot of people would have been too scared to walk through the door. Now, this is pre-internet, and I knew it would take me 3 weeks to get some of the information I needed, especially on concrete reinforcement, to design the dip vats.
But you did it.
I did it. I was on the phone the next day to the USDA to get the drawings on the concrete reinforcement.
Wow. So I want to journey back to childhood for just a second and talk about friends, because a lot of times people ask about friends. Who was your best friend?
When I was in elementary school, one of my best friends was a girl named Eleanor. And she was the first girl in elementary school to get to take wood shop instead of cooking. And I was the second girl in our school to get to take wood shop. So we liked to make stuff. It's all about making stuff. And I had good friends in high school. Even though I got bullied and teased, I got friends who shared interests. Riding horses together, doing electronics together, doing model rockets together. doing stuff together with other students.
So you found, like your mom says you found your tribe.
Yeah, and you've got to get them in doing things with other people.
And you did a lot of theater, and did you sing as a kid?
Yeah, I did. One of the problems I was singing is I couldn't synchronize my rhythm with somebody else's rhythm.
Do you still have a hard time doing that?
I still have a hard time doing that.
Because we were going to ask you if you wanted to sing something in the car with us.
Well, I think maybe we'll skip that.
Great question. But the one question people always ask us is they want to know if you've ever been in love.
No, never have.
And you don't feel like you're missing anything.
I've seen so much turmoil in so many marriages that I haven't really seen a situation that would be a good model.
And yet you gave me really good marriage advice.
Because I'm a good problem solver. You have to take the problem and cut it down. And in engineering, you have to find the root cause of a problem.
What do you think is your secret to your success as a teacher?
Well, presenting things really clearly.
Yeah.
That's really important. Making things interesting.
Yeah.
I think it's also important that it's something in a class that a student can take home and use. I teach a class in cattle behavior and handling, and I've got a lot of students that are pre-vet that are going to go in the dog and cat. Probably won't be handling any cattle. But I said, you want to design this corral system because it's visual problem solving. You have to figure out how to do it. It's not a cookbook. And then I have my internet project where they can pick out anything in animal behavior, and I make them dig into a narrow subject that I have to approve because I want them digging into Google Scholar and PubMed, Science Direct, and the other databases. They got to learn how to find stuff online, and I'm finding about 2/3 of the students are not very good at that. How about this? Make Magazine. This is the kind of thing that a lot of kids on the spectrum need to be doing. The cool stuff in here. Really interesting.
Make Magazine is going to love that you
Make
did that.
Magazine. It's a wonderful magazine. And I'm okay. Yes, and they're resurrecting old satellites from mission control and an abandoned McDonald's. That's the kind of stuff I really like. These are the kind of magazines we need to get into school. Make Magazine, Business Week, Science, Nature, Wired. We got to show kids out there. There's all kinds of super interesting stuff out there. But if they don't see it, then they don't know about it. I like to geek out on construction sites. Yeah. I like to salivate over all the equipment they've got that we didn't have, like really cool man lifts and nice scaffolding. We didn't have any of that stuff.
You didn't?
No, we didn't.
What did you guys have?
A compass? Horrid ladders that were really dangerous is what we had.
I'm going to pull up right here. We're going to get your stuff out. Yep. Putting it back up. Oh. We have to get the mic back from you too. Oh, you took it off already. You're good. That's attached to mine.
The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning. We started to play.
Good morning to you.
Sorry, I forgot.
It's still morning for you.
It is still morning for us, and welcome everybody. We've had technical difficulties this morning, and we started to play the opener for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, which is what Fridays are. We've had all kinds of technical difficulties today, and so unfortunately Nancy can't join me, but I am Shannon Penrod, and you can see who is joining me here. It is the fabulous Eustacia Cutler, and we are so over the moon excited to have her here today. She is going to be here with us, with you and I, for the next hour live. She's got a lot that she wants to tell us and some questions that you guys had sent in earlier in the week that she is going to go over. And it's going to be an hour, one for the record books, right? But I just want to tell all of you as we start here, there's lots of ways to connect and watch the show. And somebody already has just written in, Eustacia, and said they just bought your book, A Thorn in My Pocket. And for those of you who have not read that, please make sure that you do. We're going to give you some information throughout the show about how you can connect with some of the things that Eustacia has done, but A Thorn in My Pocket is a must read. So thank you and congratulations. I want to tell people, and we're going to tell this a couple of times, but if you're looking, I know when we had Temple on Tuesday, we were talking about how it is difficult to get some books quickly, but if you order directly from the publisher, you can go to fhautism.com, go to Future Horizons, and not only can you order books and hear what some of the things that Eustacia has said and some of the things that Temple has said, but you'll find information about an upcoming event that's happening with Eustacia in honor of Mother's Day. So check that out. It's coming up on May 8th. So, but Eustacia, you're here. And this is such an honor for us. And I can't say enough how thrilled I am to have you here as a mom of an individual who was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. It's just an extra special treat to hear you and hear your words. So I'm going to shut up and let you talk, because I know that there's a lot of things that you wanted to share with us this morning, but I'm here with you and I'm not going anywhere.
Well, thank you and good morning. And it's a delight to be with you via Zoom. We live in a very difficult time right now. And the first rule that I learned 70 years ago when I was raising Temple in a much easier time is that there are no answers. There are only choices. But choices can be changed. And you will change them, and you will be changed by them. So you better just embroider that on a pillow and sleep on it every night. And know too that there's hope. We learn and we change, both us and our children. And that means as time goes on, we make better choices. I think of the words of science writer Matt Ridley. He said, the genes are not the implacable little determinists we thought they were. The way their promoters turn on and off is entirely determined by external experience. And external experience is us. Also, our children are open to life, experience, and it will affect them. Never underestimate the value of education. And that being so, I'm going to start with a little education before we get to your questions. What is it, first of all, that we can do that our children can't do? It looks easy. Shannon, you and I have been talking to each other. Feels social, feels spontaneous, but actually most of it is neurological. And this is what our children lack. It's either not in their neurology or it's skewed, or maybe it's both. And what's lacking? The best illustration, and I've told it over and over, but it's so exact. I'm going to tell it again. It's about my youngest grandson, Nicholas. I have only grandsons. I have 5, and they're all grown men now. But Nicholas was a baby then. He was a baby just beginning to talk. And the first words that his grandmother heard him say were not Mama, Dada, but Oreo. He pointed to the cookie jar and he said Oreo. We all laughed, but I knew that that meant his neurology was complete. This is what he had that a lot of our children don't have. First of all, conceptual thinking, the idea of something. Nicholas understood the idea of what a cookie is for. Now you can say to an autistic child, point to the shovel. He can point to it. But if you say, what are you pointing to? Point to the thing you dig with. He's lost. He doesn't have the idea of what a shovel does. And he doesn't know, therefore he can't generalize. He doesn't know that his father's snow shovel and his little sandbox shovel are both shovels. He can't generalize. And the best example I can think of that is a young man that I know today who's about 30. Now, he lives here in New York City, and he's learned that he can cross the street when the light's green, and he can't cross the street when the light's red. So he knows enough on the streets right around where he lives. He's memorized them. What he can't do is understand that all streets operate the same way. He cannot generalize that all red and green lights mean the same thing. That limits him to the neighborhood where he's memorized the lights. Now, the next thing that Nicholas could do was context. Where are we? He understood already that he was in his high chair where he got things to eat. And if he wanted a cookie, he better speak up fast before somebody took him out of that place. Our children do not understand context. They cannot deal with prepositions. Temple had a lot of trouble with prepositions, understanding over, under, around, in between. They don't see the relationship of us to where we are, or one object to another, or even one idea to another. They don't understand relevance. Again, I think of a really smart Asperger man who can do all of these things. You see, what our children are very good at is logic and memory. He can memorize anything. He can do mathematical genius work, but he cannot understand context. And therefore, he's stuck driving a taxi cab. Now, the next thing Nicholas could do was shared information. He understood that we had a different mind from his, and he would get the idea of a cookie from his mind into our minds. And how did he do it? He looked at us and he pointed to the cookie jar. He didn't look at the cookie jar. He looked at us. He understood that's the way you share information. All this had taken place in a baby before he could barely talk. Now, at the moment, excuse me, I just dropped a page on the floor. Hold on.
Well, and while you're getting that, Eustacia, I just want to acknowledge that a lot of people have already started writing in and saying hello to you and sending you messages of love, saying how much they love Future Horizons, that Future Horizons writes great blogs. And the world is saying hello to you and saying you're such an incredible mother and advocate for all of us and for Temple, and that you inspire them. So I just wanted to share that everybody, somebody said, "Hi, beautiful mom." It is so wonderful to be able to see you. So in a way, I'm glad your page dropped, so we had an opportunity for those people to spread some love on you.
Well, thank you. And it means everything to me. I think of all the people that have helped me all of my life and Temple's life, and I was too young and too dumb to know to thank them. I can only thank them today by trying to do some of what they gave me when Temple was growing up.
It's beautiful.
I just want to get this last point in,
Yes.
because time always, things takes more time than we wish it did.
Yes.
Executive function. Nicholas could put it all together and act on it. Now, part of the problem, this is what I wanted to say, is autism sees everything, but they don't see how it connects. And they see the chairs, the floor, the podium, all in separate detail. And they can recall those details better than we can. They're great at memory and logic, but they can't put the details together meaningfully. So they memorize what's happened and figuring that tomorrow they'll know how to do it. Tomorrow's different. And the difference is not logical. There's no way to put the scene together the way it was yesterday. And this is why a lot of our children are rigid. They're trying to make the moment stand still. It doesn't stand still. And that's why it's important, as much as we can, to establish daily consistency and expectation. It helps anchor them. Now, I know you all want to know about Temple and you want to hear some answers to questions. And the first question that was on the list you gave me, Sharon, was, what was the worst moment? This leads up to it. Temple was born in 1947. As a baby, she was mute, and she had a strange stare that didn't connect. She couldn't make eye contact, she couldn't play peekaboo, and she didn't want to be touched. She'd pull away when I tried to hug her. Instead, she'd like to spit and go into gales of crazy laughter. At 2, I took her to Children's Hospital in Boston to Dr. Bronson Crothers. Now, Temple, there she was. This is the day of the big weep. They kept Temple there at Children's Hospital for 10 days observation. I went home and I wept as I have never wept again. I thought I was going to strangle on my own tears. I woke up the next morning and I realized tears were stopping me from thinking. I would never cry like that again. I would use these moments to think and figure out. It's very important, or it was to me. I never have cried like that again. I've tried to stop each moment, figure it out as best I could, and work from what I knew at that particular time. At the end of these 10 days, Dr. Carruthers said, she's autistic. And he proposed now we get into the Temple Grandin movie. These questions all overlap. What was the worst of the movie and what was the best of it? Well, one of the worst, and Temple always says, oh, mother hates that scene. I do. It was the scene where the doctor recommended institutionalizing Temple and that I stood up against him. not only was it not what I did, so it wasn't true, it was also ludicrous. I don't know who wrote it, but in 1949, women didn't have any rights of any kind. And I was a little girl of 22 who didn't know anything and had a child with autism. Do you think I could have spoken up against the whole medical profession, which was all male? I couldn't have. We couldn't even get a charge card without a father's permission or a husband's permission. Now, this also applies to the people who helped Temple. Dr. Carruthers told me who to take Temple to for speech lessons, and it was a Mrs. Reynolds, and she had a little school in her basement. Now, that was the day. Today, she would be the director of an established and funded school. Then she was just a woman. Women were allowed to teach, to be nurses, and to be stenographers. That's all we were allowed. This school, it did exist. And Dr. Carruthers knew it existed, which is part of the miracle of going to him. When you, one of the things you asked is what helped most in raising Temple? Luck. And at least keeping my mind on the situation so that I could recognize my luck when it came along. And as soon as I met Mrs. Reynolds and took Temple to her little school, I knew we were on a good track. It took Temple 3 years to learn to talk. And as you all know, she hasn't stopped talking ever since. So, but she learned something else equally important. There were other children in the class, and she saw herself for the first time in relation to other people her own age. And a doctor years later said to me, do you realize that was as important a lesson as learning to speak? Now, what was I going to say? Yes, and Temple had to learn. Now we get into rules. How did I teach her rules? Some of them, she had to learn other ways. And one of them was she had to wait her turn to be helped by Mrs. Reynolds. And Mrs. Reynolds took them into a separate room, those who needed help. And Temple learned then that rule. And it was she was only 2. And my point is, the younger you learn these things, the younger the child is before the autism pattern is fully established. You're getting started another pattern, a better one. Now, I didn't understand that when I was taking it there, but I kind of began to get a feeling about it. And I began to make other choices for Temple's future, better choices. A great thing about choices is if they don't work, choose something else. There's no hard and fast rule. Now, again, this is 1949. These accomplished women all knew each other, and they'd worked simple solutions out. Mrs. Reynolds told me to take Temple to Mrs. Huckle. Mrs. Huckle ran a little summer camp for children on the autism spectrum. Temple stayed there 3 days a week, and she liked it. It worked. And she began, again, there were other children there. They played together. This wasn't a lesson. They played games together. She began to understand how to be part of a group. And Mrs. Huckle said, I think Temple could be mainstreamed at 5 if you've got a little country day school and they understood her history. I took Temple to Dedham Country Day School. We lived in Dedham, Mass, about a half hour outside of Boston. And it was the little country day school that all the neighborhood children went to. I told them the story to Mr. Ladd, who was what do you call him then? He was the head of the school. And to Mrs. Deach, who was head of the pre-K through third grade department. They listened to the story. Now, here's where parents come in. Mr. Ladd said to me, "We will take Temple because we think we can work with you. We have turned down other parents, other children, because we didn't think we could work with the parents." It's a joint journey, and all of it is on the job training. Now, and what happened then with Mrs. Deach? She and I talked almost every day. And this meant that Mrs. Deach knew what happened at home. I knew what happened at school. It held Temple to expectation. She began to realize what was expected from her. And it also held her to consistency. Again, it grounded her. Expectation and consistency. And Temple was happy in the school. These were the children in the neighborhood where she lived, and she began to play with them. Now, there were days when Temple couldn't manage school, and Mrs. Deach would call me and say, "Can you come and get her, take her home?" Yes. And she used those times to explain to the other children in the class about autism. So now that they're all in their 70s, they feel they had a role in bringing up their famous friend, Temple Grandin. So now the other thing that Temple learned was, I have to play games by the other children's rules. Otherwise, they won't let me play. Now, when I talked to the woman who does Sesame Street, she said, "Oh, that's terrible." I said, "No, you don't understand. This is the way we play hide and seek. This is the way we play capture the flag. Games have rules. If you don't want to play the game, fine, don't play it. But if you want to join the game, these are the rules of the game." And Temple learned at 5 years old, I have to play the games the way the other kids play them, or they won't let me play. Now, girls are more social than boys are. Temple wanted to be with the children. Sometimes you've got autistic children, generally a boy, doesn't care whether he's part of the group. She wanted it. Was a big step forward. I don't know how you make children want it who don't want it. That is it. Now, Temple was happy at Dedham. Where's my list of questions? Because I have other questions. That takes care of the darkest moment. I'm saving the sibling question for the end. The movie. Oh, I know what I wanted to tell you about the movie. Yes, there was that fake scene. There were other scenes that weren't true. But Julia Orman played me in the movie. And she had read the book that you just mentioned, A Thorn in My Pocket. And that comes from a story that I picked up from a teacher I had at Harvard, who was a close friend of Robert Frost. And I told him I was nervous coming back to college late in life. And he said, his friend Robert Frost was nervous about lecturing, which he took too late in life and wasn't comfortable with it. And Frost said to him, I always carry something in my pocket I can touch when I'm talking, so I'll remember who I am. Lately, it's been a thorn. That's where the title of the book comes from. And Julia said to me, every scene I played, I kept a thorn in my pocket. Now she won an Emmy and she gave it to me. And to, which was, does anybody give up something like that? I finally decided we have to give this to a big autism organization that is in White Plains outside of New York. It's part of the big medical conglomeration of New York City. And we both agreed this was the place where it should go. So they put it in a beautiful glass case with the story beside it. And mothers come and they touch the case. They look at it and they remember the story. So that's the very good part of the movie. She and I, Julia and I, have been close friends ever since. That's the movie. Oh yeah, how did I get Temple to listen and obey? This was not as hard again because it was started early. You see, these patterns, these rules, which began to be established at 2 before she was old enough to rebel against me or hit me, as many autistic children do. They hit their mothers. The school also had rules, and that includes, there's a question in here about manners. That's what I wanted to include. Wait a sec. It was.
I think it was simply how did you get her to care about manners?
How did I get it? That was it. You're right. How did I get her to care about manners? For one thing, was a more mannered culture. For another, we all ate together. And that included lunch at the school. And they sat at a little table. The teacher sat at the head of the table. They all ate. They all had to have manners. The teacher saw to it. We don't do that now, and it's a loss. One day, Temple came home and she said to me, oh, I can't stand the way Johnny Archibald eats. He opens his mouth. It looks like a dump truck with all that food rolling around. And I said, well, now you know why I ask you to close your mouth. Yep. She's closed her mouth. And she saw how the others responded. Children were used to eating together as a family. I'm not sure that happens all the time now. We have instant food. We didn't have instant food. We prepared it, and this is the meal, and we will all sit down together and eat it. Now, Temple was happy at Dedham Country Day School, but it only went through the 6th grade. And now we got into problems of a new school because when we're into beginning of adolescence, and all children are struggling with adolescence. Nature gives them a new body, and new friends, and new clothes, and strange new feelings. Temple could no longer manage. And she didn't behave well. Again, the crazy laughter, what she thought was funny, wasn't funny to the other children. She took all their clothes when they were at gym and mixed them up in different lockers. Well, now it was a girls' school, and all these little girls had new clothes. They also had no way to get to their next class because they couldn't find their clothes. Not surprisingly, they were angry at Temple and yelled at her, and Temple hit one of them with a book. A perfectly usual spat between adolescent girls and of no consequence. But the headmaster of that school came after Temple, and I know this by heart. Temple answered the phone, as all children did in those days. They loved the phone. And the headmaster, instead of saying, Temple, may I speak to your mother? He said to her, you are a menace to society. Don't come back after Christmas vacation. An appalling thing for a grown man to do to a child. What was that compared to hitting a child with a book? Two little arguing girls of 12? It presented a problem. And again, the question of what helped most in Temple's life? We got luck again. By some lucky coincidence, I was working on a documentary on autism for WGBH in Boston, and I had visited all the special schools from Maine down through Rhode Island. Now, what's always interested me is, why didn't this school that Temple was in know about these schools? There were quite a few of them in Cambridge. They should have known. They're educators. It's their job to know. So if I sound angry, I am. It makes me angry just to tell it all over again. But I saw these different country schools. So what I did was I picked out 3 schools that I thought were really very good. And I said to Temple, you and I will go look at them. And you can decide which school you'd like to go to. Why was I in such a hurry? I knew that Temple would be shunned. There's one thing worse than being bullied, and that's being shunned. So I'm getting her out of here, out of this town fast before that can happen. Well, Temple picked Hampshire Country School. Again, it was in the country, and this time it was a farm, and there were horses. And those days, Temple was crazy about horses. And she chose Hampshire Country School, a very good school run by a wonderful man. Now she did, the first 2 years there, she did no academic work of any kind. And I was worried about that. And Henry Patey, who ran the school, said, don't worry about it. When she gets through adolescence, she will get back her mind. Let it go. But he held her to chores, very good ones. If she liked horses so much and wanted to ride them, she would clean their stables, she would feed them, she would take care of all their needs. Now, here's where the question which came up about death. It hadn't happened in her life thus far, and the life of all of my children. One of those horses at the school died. I don't know, you'd have to ask Temple what he died of, but it was a shock to Temple. For the first time, she saw the difference between life and death. The horse had died. That's where she learned about death.
I just wanted to let everybody know that the question that had been asked was that people, I wanted them to know that
I may
many
have
people
skipped,
wrote
yes,
in and said, how did you teach her about death? Because
about
that seems
death,
to be a
yes,
hard
thank
concept.
you, yes,
thank you.
because sometimes things are so clear in my own mind that
I think it was
jump a step.
implied.
Yeah, but
I think it was implied, but I just
good.
wanted to share.
But,
So
yes.
many people are writing in and saying how inspirational you are too. I'm not going to interrupt you. You go right ahead, but I just wanted you to know that they're just loving you and
Oh,
loving
good.
hearing about all
Oh,
this.
good,
And
because
she'll
our time,
continue to answer a lot of the
yes,
questions that you guys have written in.
yes, let me
She's
get
answering
to,
as
I've gone along. Yes, that takes care of that question. Uh, he held her to all those duties. Now, Temple did get back to studying, and it wasn't easy. She worked hard to get her through her high school training. Now she wanted to go to college. She was too anxious to take exams. How did she do it? This is where friendship between headmasters matter. Henry Patey and what's his name? Henry Frank DePietro was head of Hampshire, was head of Franklin Pierce College. I'm trying to get these names straight here. The two organizations were not very far apart. Now they're both teachers, so naturally they know each other. Henry Patey went to Frank DePietro and explained about the fact she couldn't take an exam. It was too threatening. And they decided to choose. They chose to let Temple go to Franklin Pierce without exams. Let's try it and see how it works. Thank God. And it worked. They also decided that Temple would return every week to the Hampshire school for support of whatever kind she needed. And that worked too. It kept the two connections. All I can think of is every child on the spectrum needs a champion, maybe several champions at different stages in her life. And those two men were champions. Now she wanted to get her MA, and Arizona State University had a math requirement and she couldn't carry it out. So between Franklin Pierce College and Arizona State University, they arranged a substitute course so she could go on there. It was not a good spell for Temple there at Arizona State University. This is what happens when people like the idea of helping autism and don't know anything about it. They didn't know how to help her. They were not Henry Patey or Frank DePietro. So it was an uneasy time in Temple's life. She did get through, and she did go on, bless her heart, to get her PhD. God bless. Yeah, I mean, Temple, I'm so proud of you. I have a note here. Let me just see if I'm answered my questions because I'm fearful our time will run out. Let me see. I think it matters. Oh, what's my relationship to Temple today? It's wonderful. We are friends, and that means everything to me. And Temple called me the other day. Here we are, all housebound. She said, "Mother," he always called her, "Mother, what are you doing about food?" And Mark, who lives on her property, he knew how to make a connection on the internet. I'm not clever with the internet, for getting food to me here in New York. So between them, they arranged so that I could get food without having to go out and be endangered. Thank you, Temple. I really, really love it. And the connections are amazing. The second time I did it, Mark called me on the phone. He said, "Well, the young man who's going to bring you food lives in your apartment." We talked. The world is much smaller than we think, too. We talked. And I said, "I would like to contribute to what you're doing." He said, "You can't. It's just a bunch of young people who have nothing to do. They can't do their jobs. So they all decided between them they would shop, particularly for the elderly who shouldn't be going out. I don't know if that's happening in your community. Do you know if it is? Do you know? Do you have that set up?
Yes, I mean, across the country, there are so many people who are
There,
volunteering and
yes,
bringing
it's
food.
bringing
Yes, it's
exactly.
amazing.
Well, that's what, and I love the fact that it turned up to be in my
In your
own
building.
apartment.
I love that too.
Let me just. I had a wait a minute. Have I got? Oh, I think there's a question of what would I say to teach parents about parenting?
Yeah, is there something that you want parents, because they're asking again here too,
Well,
they want to know what's the thing that you would tell parents? What's the one thing you would tell us?
I'm back to choices. Make choices. There are no answers. Make choices, and if they don't work, change them. Try something else and pay attention. Learn. It's a learning job for both you and the child. And you'll get better at it as you go along. And as you get better, you'll get more courageous. You'll be more active.
I want to cycle back to something that you.
Now I have
Okay.
I'm trying to tuck these things in. Where's quarter of, and that's what I
That
wanted
time.
to just let me slip in here because I want to put together siblings and change. What would I change? Oh, I would change the way I handled the siblings. They didn't get a fair shot at life. The problem for siblings is they be turned into little helpers, and they're too young to know that it's depriving them of their own development, of their own sense of self. It takes a toll. I would change that now. Now I have learned since two things. One, always save some time for the sibling, something you will do together alone. Something, it can be just everybody else out of the kitchen. We're going to get dinner together. Something where you're not eyeball to eyeball, but an activity you do together. I love the mother who said, "Oh, it's easy. We go and get our toenails painted together." The other thing I would urge is a counselor. A child knows that parents are upset. They're much more aware than any of us are conscious of that as parents. They will tell a counselor what they won't tell their mother because they know it will upset their mother. They also are often too young to have any idea how to put it into words. I loved the counselor who I met later in life who had a huge dollhouse and every kind of imaginable character, animal, furniture. And she would say to the child, "You can furnish the doll's house." She said, "The scenes they make tell her what the problem is." The other thing she did was, she said, "I always make a little tent out of blankets and give the child a flashlight and say, 'You can go in. That's your tent.'" Then she said, "I ask for permission to come in and join her." So together, the counselor and the child inside the little tent, she can then help the child to understand that she has a right to her own life. And that helps them to develop and rise above the differences. And also, what I've run into is they know what's absurd about life in a way that other children don't. And we can all use a little of that. So I think I've covered the questions.
Can I just cycle back though too, because I think
Yes.
there's a little bit of misunderstanding with at least one person. When you were talking in the beginning
Yeah.
about the lacks, the things that our children don't have, I
Yeah.
want to make sure that people understand that you were advocating for early intervention there because they can learn those things. It's not game
Yes,
over.
I should again. Thank you. I realized I had skipped over. I hadn't connected. Talk about putting context together. The relevance of education to overcome these gaps in their neurology. It's learnable.
Yes, we had one adult who wrote in and said, wait a second, I understand the difference between the shovel and the sandbox and the shovel. And I know that they're both shovels. And I just want to be clear with everybody that you weren't saying that necessarily has to be across a lifetime, that individuals given the opportunity early can learn that.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. They can learn it. And Temple has learned it.
Yes, yes.
And my point is, if you don't understand those points, you don't know to teach them.
Yes, early intervention. I think we can all agree there.
Let's just embroider that on a pillow.
Yes, let's absolutely embroider that on a pillow. Okay, I know that you had something you wanted to read. Is it time for that or not? Okay.
Yes, there is, because according to me, we've timed it perfectly.
Okay. All right.
So let me read limbo. I looked up limbo in Webster's dictionary, and I found it describes the place where we parents of autistic children find we get stuck. Limbo is the abode of souls barred from heaven through no fault of their own, a place of confinement, a place or condition of neglect or oblivion. We've all been there. That abode where we struggle with the needs of our child, caused through no fault of our own or of our child's. A condition of social isolation, of neighborhood neglect or oblivion. Trapped, hedged in by a guilt that defies explanation, we accept what the world tells us we're supposed to feel. You must love your child, the world says, and intermittently we do. As my wise daughter-in-law said, it's easy to love people when they're lovable, not so easy when they're not. The inconstancy throws us off, floods us with a raging shame. Only in private do parents ever ask me if I got angry. What do I do with these feelings, they say? How do I take care of my child and hold myself together? They're old feelings, old questions. They turn up in Psalm 42. Why art thou cast down, O my soul? And why art thou so disquieted within me? Long ago, I thought the psalm was about those on the autism spectrum. Now I know the psalm is about us. And with it comes another question. How do I cope with the physical task of caring for my child and at the same time present myself to the world as the world says I'm supposed to be? The world says my child is a gift, a special gift that will transform me into a deeper, more meaningful person. But it's not happening. My child is driving me crazy. My child is isolating me from the world. So, in order to join the world and have my neighbors think well of me, in place of love, I will substitute glory. I will glorify my child, praise every step forward. I will tell the world my child is special. And our children, trapped in autism self-absorption, assume the assigned role. In truth, we've given them no other choice. Out of our own need, we've created a role-playing partnership. Our children are special, we are noble. And neighbors, out of their need for approval, accept the partnership. They too find our children a handful. They too have feelings they don't want to say out loud. Thus, with mutual need, we construct limbo. We're all of us excused. We're all of us there through no fault of our own. The setup feels safe, but it's not. Limbo is a static condition, a place where nothing grows. It only repeats. Growth, real growth, takes courage, honesty, hard work, and insight. The setup reminds me of an old dog racing story back in the days when we used to race whippets. The oval track and the starting gate were the same as those of a horse race, only instead of a jockey with a whip, there was a mechanical rabbit set to scamper ahead of the dogs, just always out of reach. In this race, the bell clanged, the gates opened, and the dogs sprang out after the mechanical rabbit. All except for one dog. He stopped. He looked around the track. He saw that it circled around. He ran around the track the other way. He met the rabbit and chewed it up. He didn't win. Racetracks are about betting, not about intelligence or insight, and certainly not about love. But in my heart, he was the winner. We don't have to chase after the mechanical rabbit just because the other dogs do. Stop, take a look. Somewhere in that whippet reaction, and it's not the track we thought was laid out for us to run. We may not win the worldly bet, but we will escape from limbo. In the escape, we will find our child and ourselves. Where was I? Let me
Go, you go right ahead.
just got one tag here for it. Where was I in all this? Temple, my darling, when you were born, I was very young. The world I came from, the world I married into, didn't ask for much from me, but social grace. The messy business of talent and passion weren't encouraged. And autism, passion gone awry, it was hard to excuse. I had to risk rejection, and I was rejected. I had to search for myself, dig under the skin and touch the glossy viscera, looking for what constitutes being human. Autism was a way to learn, yes, but not enough. Acting and writing took me deeper. Singing was my ticket to what I needed to see and touch and feel and be a part of. In the locked wards of the veterans' hospitals, I sang for men who had lost their minds in the Korean War, that war between World War II and the war in Vietnam. Men who, under the stress of battle's horror, had become catatonic, who stood all day, rigid and worthless, wordless. I sang to them. If I knew you were coming, I'd have baked a cake. And here and there, I could see a foot tap, ever so slightly, but tapping. They were there, somewhere inside the horror. I sang in the wards for the men who had lost their faces and were waiting for the reconstructive surgery they prayed would make them look human again. I studied autism and I studied retardation. I learned that nature can make cruel mistakes, and the mistakes, however alarming, will live and talk and want attention and need love. I had to learn that madness and error are in us all, and it's only by a hair's breadth that we are who we are.
Wow. And they want to know what that is from, Eustacia. Those are your words. You wrote
I wrote them. It's all
Yes.
Limbo I wrote, and the last statement. They're all my own words.
Amazing. Absolutely.
And at the moment, I'm working on a book on the social history of autism. It's very old. We've always had it. And where do I find the best descriptions of it? In literature, books, novels. Men who understood. The best example is Dickens, Nicholas Nickleby. When you read it, you understand that Spike wasn't retarded, as he was called. He was autistic. He doesn't talk like a retarded person. Dickens was fought about this, and he justified what he had done. He had worked as a child of 12. He was put to work at a boot blacking factory where they employed children of all kinds of mental and physical difficulties. He knew what he was talking about. I think we now have used up all our time.
We are so very close, but I'm glad, thank you for stopping for a second. I wish I could read everything that you have written. They wanted to know, is Limbo from A Thorn in My Pocket? I want to make sure you guys know.
No, it's not. It's a blog. If they go to the Temple Grandin Eustacia Cutler Autism Fund website.
Okay.
It's so on there. These are blogs that I've written, and there are a lot of other ones. They're worth reading.
Yes. Well,
they're
I mean,
just pieces that I wrote that seemed to me to the point.
Yes, absolutely. And we want to make sure that you guys know, you can also go to FH, which stands for Future Horizon Autism, FHautism.com. Not only can you find A Thorn in My Pocket there, but you can find links to other things. And Eustacia is going to be doing a special Mother's Day event for Future Horizons, and information will be available on the website about that. That you guys can check out it. And I want to let you know.
I think they're going to be, I will talk to Teresa, but I think they should be able to connect to it.
There we go. And I'm going to continue talking to Eustacia, and we've got stuff in the works for you guys as well down the road.
Yes. One and one. Yes, we will do that.
Which is very, very exciting. But I just could weep because this has been such an amazing, wonderful thing to be a part of. And it's been so lovely getting to talk to you as much as we got to talk this week. That has been honestly one of the most inspirational things in my life. See, I'm getting weepy. But Eustacia, I'm gonna cut a lot of these wonderful things and paste them and send them to you so that you can read some of the see the love that has been shed upon you.
Send me the questions.
Yes,
because
I will.
Then I'd have a feeling about what's on your mind, what's troubling you. And when we did today, we just picked out general questions that were things that were pertinent to everybody. But sometimes this is why I do one-on-one talks. People have individual problems that they need to talk out. And
then I just want because I want to hear the website again for the foundation. So it's the
Temple Grandin Eustacia Cutler Autism Fund.
There we go.
And it's got a website. If you hit that, it'll come right up.
Yeah. We also posted Limbo on our link last night.
Please
you guys could read it. So it's there on our Facebook, on Autism Live's Facebook.
Yeah, and I also sent you the one about Ogden and the uncertainty principle.
Yes.
Which is a situation where the little boy who had Asperger was much smarter than the doctors. They didn't pick up, the doctors didn't get what was troubling him. And I thought this is where I also feel it's a double problem. It's not only does your child need your help, but so does the public need your help.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just want to thank all of you for being here. I feel like we've all been a part of something really incredible today, and thank you for making that possible for us, Eustacia. We are going to be back on Monday, and we have a whole array of shows for you next week because we're finishing April strong. I just want to give you an idea. We've got special education attorney Bonnie Yates with us on Monday, Alex Lynn, self-advocate from Autism Rocks. On Tuesday, we have Anita Lesko, self-advocate and author, talking about nutrition and her new book, The Food Revolution. On Wednesday, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh answers your questions. And on Thursday, we're going to finish out the month of April with self-advocate Chelsea Darnell. It's going to be an amazing. And then on Friday, we have Elaine Hall from the Miracle Project joining us. I don't know if you saw on the Today Show, they were featuring yesterday the Miracle Project. And Autism the Musical Part 2 is premiering on HBO on Tuesday. She's going to talk with us about that. So Eustacia, thank you so much for being here, and thank all of you. We're going to be back on Monday. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye. Bye-bye,
Bye-bye.
Eustacia.
Bye.
Mwah. Love you so.
Thanks to you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good
Bye.
weekend. Thank you, Eustacia.
So thank you for joining us. We're here with The Future is Bright, and we have a very special guest, Temple Grandin. Doctor, thank you for joining us. We're
It's
so
good to
excited
be here.
have you. Thank you. You just gave a great speech at the 46th annual conference here in Denver, Colorado, and we would love to take an opportunity to just ask you a couple of questions
Okay.
about a hot topic for you now, that is employment.
Yep.
And helping people with autism become gainfully employed, and what we can do as they're growing up, through the high school years and through those younger years, maybe before they're old enough to get a real job, as you'd call it. What's your advice for parents out there and what they can do with their kids today to help them?
The problem with autism is, since they changed the guidelines for diagnosis in 2013, the spectrum has become extremely broad. At one end of the spectrum, you're going to have Silicon Valley programmers, really good artists, really talented people. And at the other end of the spectrum, you're going to have someone that's going to remain nonverbal with some very severe handicaps, and it's all got the same word. You see, if you diagnose a kid with dyslexia, you still have a fully verbal kid with normal intelligence, can't read. ADHD, you've got the hyperactivity attention problems. It's a much narrower spectrum if someone is ADHD or they're dyslexic. Autism now, you've got this huge quagmire of a spectrum. And the only time I can give a specific recommendation across the whole spectrum is that the kid's 2.5 or 3 with no speech. You must start early intervention, 20 hours a week of one-on-one teaching. There's various ABA and other methods that work, but you got to start now. I can give you a canned answer. But once a child gets older, they're kind of merging into 3 different groups.
What are the groups?
Well, you're going to have a kid that's going to remain nonverbal with very severe handicaps. And some of the ones that look very low functioning actually have a locked-in syndrome with normal intelligence inside.
Okay.
Then you have a moderate group where you've got some speech, but it isn't really normal speech. Reading might be, 4th grade level, sort of like that. And then you've got the high-end group where they often are really smart in one thing, like math or art or maybe verbal, and then they have a deficit in another thing. And the education system puts too much emphasis on the deficits, not enough emphasis in building up the area of strength. Mm-hmm. If you've got a 3rd grader that's good in math, let's give them harder math and let's introduce them to programming.
Okay.
Because that's something that could turn into a job. The programs that are hot right now are C++ and JavaScript, Ruby and Python. The courses are free online, but the kid's not going to get interested in that unless you introduce it.
And who should be doing that? How do you recognize that you've got a kid with, let's say, a great math capability or great
All
art
right, so
capability?
you should give the kid the 3rd grade math. He instantly learns it. Let's get the 4th grade book out.
Okay.
Let's get the 5th grade book out. Let's get the 6th grade book out. If he can do the college book in 3rd grade, fine, let him.
Okay.
He's probably going to need special ed.
So
reading.
very early.
Oh yeah, don't make him do baby math. He's going to get bored, and I guarantee you he'll be a gigantic behavior problem when he's bored.
It sounds like you think there might be a little bit of a coddling issue where parents are concerned.
Oh, I think there's a big coddling issue on just learning things like greeting. I'm really appalled at meetings where, come to a meeting, here is a 12-year-old completely and fully verbal that does not know how to shake hands. He doesn't know how to greet. You see, the manners in the 50s were taught in a much more structured way.
Right.
And teachable moments were used. Like if I picked up my potatoes with my hand, and I'm not French fries, but mashed potatoes with my hand, mother would say, use the fork. She didn't scream no, she'd say, use the fork. That's a teachable moment.
Healthy alternative.
And I was at a very fancy dinner one time at a college, and there was a 12-year-old kid there, fully verbal, and he started to eat the food with his hands. And I just said, this is a fancy dinner. You're not eating like that in front of me. You use the utensils. And he did.
So it's
I
just
just
calling him
gave the
out.
instruction. But you give the instruction. I didn't yell at him. You give the instruction. But there's a tendency to overprotect. I'm seeing too many fully verbal kids that don't know how to shop.
Sure.
They're not doing any chores in the home. Just basic things, greeting people. When I was 8 years old, mother had me party hostess at her parties. And I had to greet the guests and serve the snacks.
So it sounds like your mother had a lot of faith in your ability to just take those tasks that she was giving you and do them.
Well,
and
so
you're
you got
saying,
to stretch these kids.
Stretch
you see,
them,
the kids
okay.
getting labeled autistic, the babying them. And you know, if you have a little kid, you know, that's, you know, severe behaviors. I was severe behaviors when I was 3 years old.
Sure.
You know, of course the parents are going to be upset about that. But then you got another kind of kid, 10 years old, no friends, geeky and nerdy, gets a label, and not enough's being done to engage his area of strength and teach him basic skills. Because what makes me crazy is I go back and forth between different silos. I'll do a talk out at Silicon Valley. You can go to the big tech companies. It's Asperger's everywhere. Cube after cube full of them. Headphones clamped on, don't even look up at you. I can go to the meatpacking plants. There's a whole shop full of hippies there. And I know they're on the spectrum. They've been there for years. This is what makes me crazy when I go out into the cattle world or the tech world or even the academic world, and I find older people my age, maybe 10 years old, that are on the spectrum, but they're not diagnosed.
so it sounds like you're saying in today's society, less helicopter parenting
That's right.
and more, you know, you must do this and reinforcing. These are the manners you need. This is how
Well,
we
you
act.
just treat them. You got to move them just outside the comfort zone. I just met a lady when I was down in Argentina. I said, well, I can only shop at this one supermarket, this one newsstand. I can't go to another store. You know what I did with her? We watched
Took
out
her
of that
somewhere.
meeting, and we went to a new newsstand.
So
and
you
I
walked
brought her up
through.
to it, and I said, buy that magazine there. She wrung her hands a little bit, and she bought it.
Okay.
You
so
know,
you made someone else walk through the proverbial
I did.
door. Good for
That's
you.
right. That's what I did. I did that last week.
And you're encouraging parents to do the same thing with their kids
And then
now.
we're going to be getting into looking at the job front.
Okay, now that's something you just gave a great speech about. And it sounds like that's this new hot topic for you about how kids in their maybe early teens, maybe before they're really able to get formal jobs, should be out doing maybe the paper route type equivalent.
Okay, we don't have paper routes anymore. In fact, I got asked.
The equivalent.
I got asked the other day what a paper route is.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. And
By an
I
adult?
said, well, you know, they used to have children deliver newspapers to people's
Sure.
houses, and that taught really valuable skills.
Okay.
Okay, now we don't have that today.
But
How
what's the
about
equivalent?
walking some dogs for the neighbors? You can do that in the city.
Okay.
You know, but not your own dogs, somebody else's dogs, and you got to go over that at 2 different apartments at 6 o'clock in the morning. Take those dogs out and walk them every day, even when the weather's nasty. Or maybe working in the farmer's market. Okay, we were just discussing New York City, where my mother lives. When I stay at the hotel in New York and I walk 6 blocks to my mother's apartment, I go buy 5 or 6 street vendors. Okay, a kid that's like 12 or 13 years old, have them help out a street vendor. They've got to start learning work skills. If they're out in the suburbs, they can help out in the farmer's market.
Okay.
Let's start getting creative. Let's start off with church and synagogue jobs, things like that. Church ushers, setting up chairs for the church social. Yes, it's a job. Every Thursday night, you got to do those chairs.
So it's the accountability, being somewhere where someone's expecting you to help out and do a particular
Then
thing.
it's a defined task. You got
Okay.
100 chairs to put up,
Defined.
and you got 100 chairs you're going to have to put away after the event is over.
So defined and repetitive and something that they do.
Well, a lot
Not
of jobs
for
are
the
repetitive.
family.
Newspaper routes are repetitive. But let's go through my work history. These kids have got to learn work skills outside the home before they graduate my school. All right. When I was 13, mother just in the neighborhood found a little seamstress that did dressmaking out of her home. And she went in and told about me. I was kind of different,
Sure.
but I was really good at hand sewing. So the lady started having me hand sew the hems and take apart dresses. When I was 15, I was cleaning horse stalls.
Okay.
Then when I got a little bit older, I was making signs and selling them. And the first sign I ever made was for a beauty shop. First sign I ever made for a customer. I had made some other signs before that. but making things, and you have to learn how to make signs that other people want. And then even when I was getting my master's, I was making signs.
So
The carnival. And then
our
my
kids-
aunt's ranch. At my aunt's ranch, there was some work stuff. I had to take guests out on trail rides, and I had to do some, she had guests there. I had to wait
So
on
you were
tables there too.
accountable. You were given
Yeah.
various tasks and you were accountable. It sounds like that you're endorsing that we have our kids go out there when they're younger and do these, you know, smaller jobs for people in the neighborhood or small business owners and learn those skills before they get to
Okay,
a
now
job
some
related
states you
age.
can work in safe retail at 14.
Okay.
Okay, a lot of other states it's 16. Well, you know, let's say you got a friend 2 blocks away, like a little tax accounting office.
Sure.
They can put the kid to work in there.
Perfect.
You know, cash economy.
Something.
They've got to learn work skills. And just look at the things they're maybe it's a little coffee
Something.
stand that's in the neighborhood, and the kid when he's 12 can go help out with that. And he's expected there at certain hours every week. It's a job.
Okay. And so that's the importance of it all, is just
They
to
have
get
got
them out
to
there.
learn how to work. And when I was 14, I got kicked out of school for fighting and throwing a book. Went to a very expensive boarding school. Spent 3 years of that time running a horse barn and cleaning horse stalls. And what Mr. Patey, the headmaster, realized, I was learning job skills. That was super important. And then when I finally got interested in science and studying, I kind of did a year of high school in a year.
Okay.
But I had been working in the horse barn. I had learned that the responsibility every afternoon you got to clean every stall, put them in and out, feed them.
So it's responsibility. Have our
That's
parents
right.
allow their kids to get out there and just not be afraid to do it before
They
they
got
get.
to get out.
Okay.
And the Project Search research has shown very clearly that working in a real job a whole year before they graduate from high school is very, very important for keeping employment after they graduate.
Okay, so along those same lines, now you've got a group of kids in today's society who have gotten out there and, let's say, worked at these little carts or local small businesses informally while they're
Yeah.
younger, and they get older and they're able to get into the workforce. They need to get there. You got to get to your job. So you have to be able to drive if you can, if you're capable of driving. Talk to us about your stance on
Well,
driving.
driving was essential for me. I would have never been able to go into the cattle industry without driving. There's a scene in the movie where I get kicked out of Scottsdale Feed Yard. I was
Yep.
driving.
It was
If I
beautiful.
hadn't have been driving, I wouldn't have gone to Scottsdale Feed Yard to get kicked out of it.
Yep.
And so how did I learn to drive?
How?
On my aunt's ranch. We were 3 miles to go up to the mailbox and 3 miles back. And she started having me drive up to the mailbox on a dirt road. Well, over the whole summer, that was 6 miles a day, 6 days a week, I put 200 miles on that truck driving just on this dirt road,
Just to pick up the mail.
just to pick up the mail. That's what we had to do. That's the way
Okay.
it was on the ranch. The mailbox was 3 miles away.
Okay.
So that was 200 miles of driving. That's a tank of gas. And I hadn't been near any serious traffic at that point.
Okay.
I think what you need to be doing is burning up a tank of gas in a totally safe place. Country dirt roads, giant big deserted parking lots, or open dry flat fields. Because there are some multitasking issues, and what the kid needs to do is he's got to learn how to operate that car before we go near any traffic. And the problem with driver's ed is they put them into traffic too fast. So I want to burn up this tank of gas in a totally safe place, then you do the driver's ed.
Okay.
So they fully learn how to steer, brake, stop. You can practice parking, practice all kinds of stuff, because this deals with the problems with executive function and multitasking. See, when you learn a motor skill like driving, you first of all have to think about how to steer, how to brake, and how to use the gas. Now, as you practice it, you no longer have to think about it. It just goes in your motor cortex.
Sure.
Well, before we go near any traffic, I want operation of the car migrated into the
secondary.
motor cortex of the brain.
So once that's second nature, and a kid goes out there and is learning how to drive on, let's say, this deserted road
Yeah,
or this
that's
open
right.
parking lot, and they've got steering down, and you want to maybe throw some things into the mix before they ever go into driver's ed, like it's raining, there's windshield wipers, and you need to look at your turn signal, and oh, by the way, you're about to park, those types of
Well,
things.
then you start teaching them how to use the turn signals.
Teach them everything.
You just teach them everything, and then even after I got a car, I went to Franklin Pierce College, but that was out in the country. There was some traffic, but it was really mild traffic. So I was another year on easy roads before I did any really serious traffic. Also, like downtown Denver, I just absolutely hate coming here. I actually avoid the rush hour, but you see the airport route, I know exactly where the lanes are, where I have to
Okay.
get over.
It's a more comfortable route.
The airport's totally comfortable.
Okay.
You know, so like going to the airport's easy. See, all my agricultural jobs were out in the country. So,
Sure.
but even on Denver traffic, okay, I would learn a certain route. There's some really bad exits where you can get forced off. Well, then I got to learn where I got to get over, and I'd learn the route. But it's just going to take longer. So I'm recommending a tank of gas in a totally safe place before we do any driver's ed, a year on easy roads before we do downtown traffic or crowded freeways.
Just a period of acclimation, it sounds
That's right.
like. Okay.
It's going to take longer.
For multitasking skills in general, whether it's
Well,
driving
multitasking is the problem. You see, and the way to avoid the multitasking is there's no multitasking if the operation of the car is migrated out of frontal cortex back to the motor cortex. So you don't have to think about driving the car.
So you want that extra time.
That's right. And then turn signals, well, you can practice that even on my aunt's ranch, where we would go up to the mailbox. There was one turn to the mailbox where I could practice a turn signal.
Okay. Okay, so that's driving.
That's right.
Now they can get to the job. They've learned how to drive. They've had their practice at manners at a young age and doing some of these informal jobs. Do you have specific advice for what we can tell adults with autism who feel like they've got the right skills to get out
Let's
into the workforce?
short circuit the interview process.
Okay.
Because when we were just talking about this at the tech conference I was just at
Sure.
across the street with Specialist Cistern, that company, tech company that hires people on the autism spectrum, and they were talking about how they got to short circuit the interview process, and the way that I would do interviews is to simply show off my portfolio. I'd show pictures of things I designed, drawings. Okay, if it's a programmer, needs to show a computer in there. Here's some C++ that code and it does this, and I got some JavaScript and it does this, and you just show off your portfolio.
So maybe a different kind of interview
That's
process
right.
for people
That's
on
right.
the spectrum.
And then once they get on the job, the thing employers have to realize is you cannot be vague. There's a scene in the movie where my boss slammed down the deodorant and said, "You stink, use it." That happened.
Right.
They got to clean up themselves, and I did it. And that boss, I'm pretty sure, was on the spectrum.
But you
that
said
did
you
that.
appreciated that.
Now,
because
I
it
was very
direct.
angry at the time. I was very angry and upset at the time, but I wanted the job. I thank that boss now, and I thank Linda Carpenter and her other secretary friend that took me out to buy the clothes.
Okay. So are there things that you would recommend to employers that they can do to be more receptive to people with autism?
A lot of people on the spectrum need a quiet place to work. You know,
Okay.
some of these restrooms have these horrible Dyson blade air hand dryers. Now, if my office cube was next to that, I wouldn't be able to work.
I wouldn't either.
I've got to get away from that. And quiet place to work. Also, clearly define the tasks. Even now, I mean, when I do consulting, I've worked on a big manuscript with 15 other people. And I just said, I need homework. Okay, tell me I'll write this part of the manuscript, and I'll do it in this format, get it done on this date.
Okay.
Then, when I read through the rest of the manuscript, I found some technical errors. You know, some things there might be opinion. These were purely technical errors. Another person corrected them, no track changes, just sent it on in.
Okay.
Because you don't rub the other person's nose in their mistakes.
Well,
Because I got in trouble for doing some of that.
That's good practice anyway.
Yeah.
That's just nice, social skills. So it sounds like then, to just recap it, for employers today to clearly define tasks for people on the
That's right.
spectrum who are coming into the workplace, that's a great way to be sensitive
All right,
to
let's say
helping them
it's
succeed.
programming. You don't just say develop new software. That's too vague.
Right.
They've got to write
Be
some
direct.
code that does. You don't tell them how to write the code. That's up to the ASPE to do that. But what is the outcome? Okay, that's to go on a certain platform, be a certain language,
Sure.
and it's got to achieve a certain outcome.
Great.
And there's some deadlines.
Great. And deadlines, okay.
Well, when I worked for the magazine, the deadline was so many column inches by the 15th of each month. And I was to cover a wide variety of livestock topics.
Well, I think that that's great advice for employers out there, because it's been a big question, and I know we're out of time, we have to wrap up, but it's been great to talk to you about just the employment issue in general. My advice to employers as an attorney would be, give them a quiet place, give them the
There's
well-defined
one
tasks.
other issue I want to talk about, and that's the
What's that?
video game addictions. I'm seeing way too many kids where moms are coming to me and says, he's 21, I can't get him out of the basement, and he's 18,
Okay.
I can't get him out of the bedroom. we've got to limit the video game playing.
Well, I think all parents sort of feel that way. And
Well, we've got to, because they're not having good outcomes.
the more you limit the video games and the more you can do, like what you said, is to help socialize people, the more we spend one-on-one time like you and I have talking to each other face to face,
Yep.
the more we all benefit
I'm
by
not-
better social skills.
I'm not suggesting banning video games, but the rule for me was
Is a
1 hour
limit.
of TV during the week and 2 hours on Saturday, 2 hours on Sunday, so they can do it
And that's
some. And
That's a great way to wrap it up. That's
you
great
can't let them
advice.
play video games for 8 hours a day.
Well, of course not. Of course not. I think all parents would agree with you, but especially.
But unfortunately, I'm seeing too many kids where that's happening.
Okay. Well, it's good advice. It's good advice if you want to be successful in the
The other
employment
thing
industry.
is, you've got to expose kids to enough different things. Like, how's a kid going to find out he might like acting for a career if there's no school play? How's he
Right.
going to find out he likes
Oh my
fixing
gosh.
cars if there's no auto shop? They've taken these things out of the schools. I think it's completely wrong. Kids are not getting exposed to enough different things to become careers.
Okay.
Okay.
So lots of exposure. Gosh, thank you so much,
Okay.
Temple. We appreciate
Thank
your
you.
time. It's been fabulous. Thank you for joining us
You're
on The
welcome.
Future's Bright.